Thank you. نبدا بس نترجم هو ايش حكى، هو الفرق ما بين اللي هو الانترنال والاكسترنال. اذا في حد ما فهمتوش عشان انا اتعلم وياه.
يعني مش مجال عفوا لو الشاشه هذه مثلا على الجوال انه
كله رح يبقى
يعني لا عفوا مش واضحه الشاشه.
انا هيك مش هقعد عنك. Yes, we can go ahead, Michael.
Okay. So sometimes a lab may ask if I'm using a third-party internal QC. So, for example, using a Randox QC instead of the first party, does that mean that I don't need the EQA anymore? And the answer is no, you still should be using EQA. Ideally, you should have a QC and an EQA for every test for which you're reporting patient results. Again, your QC is mainly looking at precision, where your EQA is to assess accuracy. And ideally, you should have it for every assay and every instrument as well. I think that's also an important point with RIQAS, that for any RIQAS registration, you can have up to 5 instruments per registration. So if you have, for example, more than one chemistry instrument within the lab or more than one immunoassay, it's a good idea to divide the sample. You can register both machines and then get a report for both, because if patient samples are going on both machines, you should do your EQA on both machines as well.
هنبدا بس بيحكي انه هل انا لو استخدمت الثيرد بارتي انترنال كواليتي كنترول زي اللي هو راندوكس انترنال كواليتي كنترول بستخدمه بشكل يومي كمثال، هل هيكون بديل عن اللي هو الاي كيو اي تبع راندوكس؟ بيحكي انه لا، مش هيكون بديل، لانه اول حاجه احنا هذاك بنعمل بشكل يومي، هذاك بدنا ناخذ منه الدقه عشان نعرف كيف احنا لكل فحص بنعمل، لكل اساي بنعمله جوا الاكويبمنت لازم نعمل له اللي هو external quality control. Yes.
So in terms of ISO 15189, what they recommend in terms of EQA, there's a couple of things that they mention. One of them is that they should that if the lab is picking an EQA provider, the EQA provider should be ISO accredited. The ISO is 17043. So RIQAS is an ISO accredited manufacturer, and then basically just that they should participate in an interlaboratory external quality assurance program.
هو بيحكي انه ضمن الايزو متطلبات الايزو انه لازم انت تعمل اكسترنال كواليتي كنترول مع منظمه او جهه عندها هي نفسها اللي هو الايزو اكريديشن. فهو بيحكي لكم انه راندوكس تعتبر من واحده من المنظمات اللي هي اصلا معتمده للايزو 170 فعشان هيك بحكي لكم انه احنا بنغطي اللي هو هذا الجزء من الايزو ستاندردز. يس.
The other important thing is the laboratory shall integrate their EQA samples into the routine workflow. So basically what that means is whenever they get an EQA sample, they should treat it the same as a patient sample. So that means there shouldn't be any special treatment. They shouldn't be doing, fresh calibration, fresh reagent, fresh everything, because then that gives them an inaccurate picture of how their lab's actually working. They should just run it as if it's a routine patient sample. Another thing is that they shouldn't compare results with their friends. So one lab shouldn't call the other and say, what result did you get? Because that means, again, ultimately RIQAS is not the accreditor. We don't do any accrediting. You can fail every sample if you want. RIQAS doesn't do anything. RIQAS is a quality improvement tool. So there's kind of no point in cheating it because you're only cheating yourself.
بيحكي زي ما حكى هيك انه اول حاجه هذه تعتبر لازم تعتبروا السامبل تبعت الاي كيو اي تعتبر كعينه عاديه، مش نجيب لها ريجنت جديده نفتحها من العلبه ولا تعامل معامله عينه المريض. غير هيك بيحكي يعني مش بنفس الوقت لما كنتوا تعملوا الغشوش، يعني ما تصيرش على الثاني يقول له كيف كانت نتيجتك، لانه انتوا لما بتغشوا حالكم مش فاضيه،
مثل المريض
لانه هم بس بيقدموا لكم الخدمه
ما بتلاقيش مع بعض.
عاملين مجموعه
ما انا قلت.
So, you know, the purpose of EQA is in quality improvement. It's about getting your results more accurate than they were the month before. And it really is a tool to review and assess analytical performance. That's why understanding the reports is so critical. If you receive the report each month and don't do anything with it or don't understand what it means, there's less benefit to running the program itself. And it helps you get a good assessment of your accuracy in terms of how you're comparing with international labs running the same machines, and reduce errors and ultimately increase confidence in patient results. And it gives you international evidence if your lab results are being questioned. For example, if a patient gets one result from one lab and a different result from another lab, and you're doing investigation, is the result correct? One of the very useful tools is to look at your EQA performance, because if your EQA performance shows that you have good accuracy, you can be more confident that the results being provided to the patients have good accuracy.
هو بيحكي ايش الهدف منها. اول حاجه نحن نحسن الجوده في المختبر، ثاني حاجه ان هي تساعدنا في التحليل المبدئي للاداء في المختبر. يعني هو عشان هيك ممكن نحن نشرح لكم كيف التقرير النهائي كيف تقروه عشان تقدروا تشتغلوا بناء عليه، لانه اذا احنا بعثنا لكم تقرير انتم مش عارفين كيف تشتغلوا عليه مش هتقدروا تشتغلوا فيه وتحسنوا من البرفورمانس في المختبر. ثالث حاجه انه اللي يساعد في الدقه، يساعد انه يقلل الايرورز في المختبر، وبزود الثقه في النتائج اللي بتطلع من هذا المختبر مقارنه بمختبرات ثانيه ما بتعملش Yes.
Because often I might visit a lab and I'll ask them, how's RIQAS going for your lab? Maybe they've used RIQAS for years. And often they'll say, yes, it's very good. We've no problems. But then whenever they show us a report, a red triangle on a report means they have a performance issue. So the key thing is that if you have red triangles on your reports, it's very important to do investigation about the why that is, because otherwise you're like an ostrich putting your head in the sand and imagining you don't have any problems when maybe you do, and maybe it's affecting your patient results.
هو ايش بيحكي انه لو مثلا اجى زياره على المختبرات اللي هم بيعملوا فيها هذا البانلز، وقال لهم كيف ريكاس معكم، كيف تشتغلوا في البانل، قالوا كل حاجه ممتازه مقارنه كيف كان الاداء تبعهم. التقرير اللي جاهم كان في علامات حمراء. هذه هي النقاط اللي بيقول لك لازم تدور وراها، وبعديها راح تعمل ايش بنعمله بالعاده لما بنشوف اي حاجه بنعمل كوركتيف اكشن، يا بنعبي نون كونفورميتي وغيرها. ما نكون زي النعامه انه احنا بنغطس راسنا بالارض وبنقول كل حاجه منيحه.
And I think it's an important point as well is that one of our philosophies at Randox, whenever we provide RIQAS, is that we're not just selling you the kit and then saying see you next year. Part of what you're getting is the kit and the reports, but also the support, because ultimately RIQAS is a quality improvement tool. So through both Randox directly and our distributor Lemix, we can give you support to help you troubleshoot any problems you have. Again, to help establish why it is. Sometimes it can be a basic problem like the registration has been incorrectly chosen or wrong unit, but it might also be a serious performance issue with the instrument. So it's important to be able to identify that.
هو بيحكي انه احنا في راندوكس مش هنكون بس نديكم الكيتس تبعت البانل وبوب خلص نشوفكم السنه الجايه. هو بيحكي لكم انه راح نكون متابعين خطوه بخطوه معاكم، وبعد النتائج لما تطلع هم في راندوكس والوسيط تبعهم ليمكس راح يتابعوا معاكم النتائج اللي بتطلع، كيف ممكن يكون الترابل شوتنج تبعها، كيف ممكن يشتغلوا عليها، هل هي بس تعتبر مشكله اساسيه مثلا في التسجيل في البانل، او ممكن تكون مشكله اساسيه كبيره وبدها حل، فيتبعوا معك مش راح يسيبوكم. Yes.
Often what we'll find as well with labs whenever they start with RIQAS, especially if they're using a QC from the same brand as their instrument, they will get an EQA performance flag, but they'll say, but my QC says I'm okay. But that's often exactly the point, is the QC sometimes will not identify performance issues that the EQA will pick up. So really, both of them have to be working well for you to be confident that your results are reproducible and accurate, and you should not ignore an EQA performance flag because your QC says you're fine.
هو بيحكي انه مثلا لما يجيبوا لكم نتيجه ويكون فيها خلل، بس انت تقول له بس انا كل يوم بعمل الكواليتي كنترول وبيطلع معي باص. فهو بيحكي لكم انه برضه نفس الشيء، الاي كيو اي بيكون اعم وادق من الانترنال كواليتي كنترول. غير هيك بقول لك انه ما تاخذ انه تقول انه انا بشتغل على الكواليتي كنترول وبقول كل حاجه منيحه، يعني مش هاخذ بالاكسترنال كواليتي كنترول. فلازم الاثنين يكونوا نفس الشيء عشان يعكسوا.
واحد بكون بريسايز بس ما تاكد باختصار يعني.
Yes.
I think as well, we'll go through it in a second, but a very important thing to understand with RIQAS is that whenever, say for example, you're running glucose and the target that you've been given is 20 for glucose, that target is not being
The glucose. Okay.
So say glucose or TSH, the target that you're compared with on RIQAS is the peer group target. So it's not that we've ran, our Roche machine at Randox and told you that the result should be 20. The target is based on the mean of all the users worldwide. So we don't define what the result should be. It's the peer group that defines it. But it means then if you're not getting a result similar to the target, that means you're not near the peer group. So I think it's an important thing to understand.
Did you understand that? No. Okay, so what he's saying is all the results are collected from the peer group. So the same test with the same equipment, with the same kind of reagents are compared to each other, and that's how they establish the actual result. So we're being compared to the peer group, not a set number. So they need to be within that same peer group.
فهمت عليها؟
هي حكت لنا ولا إلك؟ أنا مش فاكرة والله.
هو نفس هو النتيجه تطلع لك تطلع مقارنه بالنتيجه تبعت المين تبع البير جروب كله.
So like the control has got a set number. Every time you run the internal control, it has a set number. It has to be 20. So this, because everybody worldwide, they use different reagents, they use different tests, they use different equipment. You're not being compared to a set number. You're being compared to the peer group, the people who are running the same kind of test on the same kind of equipment, the same kind of.
لانه انت مثلا نقول انه بس لفحص واحد كانوا بيعملوه مثلا 5000 مختبر حول العالم، انت ما بتتقارن بال 5000، انت بتتقارن بالناس اللي بيشتغلوا نفس الميثود على نفس الجهاز على نفس الايجنت. فهمت عليها؟ Yes, we got it now.
Yeah, I think the point I'm trying to make is that if we decided on our machine at Randox what the target should be, maybe our machine has a problem. So that's why a peer group based target is much more reliable, because you're looking at probably hundreds of labs around the world, and that's been used to define the target. So it means that it's much more relevant to you rather than Randox saying, well, we think the result should be this, but our machine might be wrong also.
هم بيحكوا انه احنا لما بنعمل هذا البانل بنديهم الريزلت، فانت لما بتقارن انت بالمجموعه اللي انت مع بعض اللي بيشتغلوا على نفس الجهاز على نفس الرياجنت على نفس الميثود، هذول لما بتطلع النتيجه ممكن ريكاس نفسهم لما يكونوا عملوها بشكل مش دقيق، بس المقارنه راح تكون مع البير جروب اللي انت من ضمنه.
يس قصده مش مقارنه بالقيم تبعتهم الخاصه، مقارنه بالمين تبع الناس اللي في الجروب هذا.
It will not be compared to the results from RIQAS. It will be compared to the peer group, which is in the same method, the same equipment, the same reagent.
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll talk a little bit about it later, but one of the critical things with EQA is that you set up a protocol within the lab for how you deal with a EQA performance issue. This is an example. I can send it to you via PDF of a checklist that you can go through when you're troubleshooting, whenever you're troubleshooting a performance flag. Sometimes the lab will just use this as it is. Other times they will take it and make their own version. You don't need to submit this to RIQAS. Again, RIQAS is just a quality improvement tool. It's for your own use, but I imagine for you as a group of labs, it'd be very important to be able to document and follow whenever you have performance flags, because it's also then useful, because it means if you see the same problem again, you can go back to 6 months ago and check and see what you did and what the problem was, to see is this the same problem again or something different, or maybe you see a problem in one lab that then's repeated in another, and if it's documented, it's easier to follow and stop it from happening.
وبيحكي انه كل مختبر بيشارك في الكيو لازم يكون في عنده بروتوكول من قبل ما يبدا يستقبل البانلز، كيف بده يتعامل مع هذه البانل، لو صار في بعديها مشكله غيره كيف بدك تتعامل معه. فهو بقول لكم انا ممكن اشارك معكم الليسته اللي هو عرضها، مش ما تاخذوهاش زي ما هي، اعملوها لمختبراتكم على اساس انه هي تعتبر جزء من الدوكيومنتيشن بعد ما تستقبلوا العينات. Yes.
Okay. So then we come on to the reports themselves for RIQAS. So like I've mentioned already, just because a lab participates in the EQA program, it doesn't lead to an improvement in quality. Whenever you participate in the EQA program, you get a certificate that you can put on the wall. Quite often we visit labs that put the certificate on the wall, but all that is a certificate of participation. It doesn't give them anything in terms of analytical performance. What really is the most important thing is what are the results actually like, and are they using it appropriately in order to improve their performance. EQA results should be interpreted and understood. They require conclusions. They may or may not require corrective actions. Sometimes it's something that you don't need to corrective action, but then also check the effectiveness of the corrective actions. And that's why having a monthly program where you're getting a report the next month, that means if you do have a problem, you've only got a short period of time until you get your next report to see have you fixed the problem or not.
هو بيحكي لكم انه جزء من مشاركتكم براندوكس ما بيعني انه انتم الخدمه في مختبراتكم صارت الجوده عليا. احنا هنخليكم تشاركوا فيها وراح نديكم نتائج، نديكم شهاده ان انتم شاركتوا فيها، بس ممكن وزرنا كثير مختبرات قبل هيك كانوا بس معلقين الشهادات على الحيط، لكن على ارض الواقع الاداء ما تحسن. هو بقول لكم احنا نديكم التقارير بناء عليها ممكن تشوفوا اذا في بدها كوركتيف اكشنز غيره، اي حاجه بعديها بدها شغل، هي هذه اللي تحسن على الاداء، مش بس الشهاده اللي حيعطوكوا اياها. Yes.
And I think in terms of that third point, checking the effectiveness of the corrective actions, a good idea is, say, for example, in chemistry and immunoassay, each of the samples is 5 ml. Now, unless the lab is running 5 machines to run them on, chances are they're going to have leftover material. So a good thing to do is to reconstitute the material. You run part of it, then you put the other part in the freezer. Then once you get your report back, if you have any performance issues that you want to do troubleshooting and corrective action on, you can then take that sample out of the freezer, thaw it, and then rerun it to see is your performance any better, worse, same. So it means you don't even necessarily have to wait until the next sample. So it's very useful to do that as well.
هو ايش بحكي لكم؟ بقول لكم انه في شغله معينه كمان ممكن هو يديكم لها مثال، زي ما حكى انه قديش الافكتفنس للكوركتيف اكشن اللي انتم بتعملوه. الحين هو يبعث لكم العينه هتكون مثلا 5 ملم للكيمياء، كان ممكن ان انت تشتغل عليها 5 اجهزه، بس هي سجلت كل 2 كمثال. الحين ممكن نص العينه الثانيه انت تحتفظ فيه في الفريزر، وبعد ما تجيك النتائج وتعمل كوركتيف اكشن ممكن هذه هي نفس تطلعها تشتغل عليها ثاني، تشوف هل اللي انت اشتغلته حل المشكله ولا لا، احسن ما انه تستنى لسه للعينات اللي رح تجيك في الشهر اللي وراه.
ايش؟ ما تاخذوش منها وتوزعوا على باقي المختبرات، الكبير اللي عندنا زي ما هي.
احنا في الميتنج العينه
نحكي عليها بعد ما نخلص.
So if you are doing your corrective action forms and it says whether you can close it, you would not close your corrective action until you have shown that your corrective action has been effective, and this is giving you the method to show how it is effective.
يعني هو لما جاتكم النتيجه فتحتوا فيها كوركتيف اكشن، ممكن انت ما تسكرش الكوركتيف اكشن غير لما تعيد النتيجه تتاكد انه هي انحلت وتسكرت فعلا. يعني هذه انه زي نظام الايفيدنس انه هي انت حلتها وسكرتها. Yes.
And just to re-emphasize the point as well is that it's not if you have a performance issue, it's not that you need to report the issue or give an answer to RIQAS as to why it is. RIQAS is just the tool. If you fix it or don't fix it, that's up to you. But from your own perspective and in-house and within yourselves as a group of labs, obviously you want to be able to improve something. But so if you get a performance flag, it's not that you submit a document to RIQAS and we delete it and then pretend everything was perfect again. It stays on your report. You can't get it removed. The only way you can get a result, an erroneous result, removed is if you've ran the wrong sample. For example, you ran July sample instead of June, or you reconstituted incorrectly. In those situations, they can remove the result. But if it's anything else, then basically the result stays on your report. But it's useful because then you can see when your problems were.
هو بيحكي مثلا ما حكينا حضرتك كوركتيف اكشن ونعيدها ثاني، ومثلا صلحنا كان في عندنا مثلا علامه حمراء على فحص معين مثلا في الكيمياء، رحت عدت عملت في اجراء تصحيحي وطلعت النتيجه ضمن مثلا اللي كان في الفحص. هو بيحكي لك مش انه انت تبعت لي في الاخر كوركتيف اكشن وتقول لي شيل العلامه الحمراء هي حليناها، هي راح تضلها على الريبورت. هذا الشيء لإلكم انتم مش لإلهم. فهو بيحكي لك ممكن تشيل علامه بس في حاله انه انت مثلا اخذت جون سامبل بدل جولاي سامبل ودخلتها واشتغلت عليها. فهمت علي؟ بس تعملوش هيك يعني. Yes.
So in terms of just an idea of the reports, the majority of the reports, they follow the same method and the same scoring system. So basically they have 7 different parts. So basically in a RIQAS report, you get 1 page for each assay that you're running, and then you get a summary page at the end. So basically what you have here, see, the slides go through this one by one, but basically I'll go through it in more detail, but you have a text section, histogram, and then 4 charts down the right hand side.
وبحكي لكم انه الكور نفسه راح يكون نفس الكيفيه زي ما انتم شايفينه لكل اساي انتم دخلتوها. لما يجيكم الريبورت راح يجيكم بالطريقه هذه، في اللي هو الجزء الكتابه وفي الدياجرام وهذول لكلهم، بس هذا شوي شوي راح يفوت واحده واحده فيهم كيف نتعامل معهم. Yes.
So basically, overall, there's 3 main performance indicators on RIQAS that you're scored on. You have percentage deviation, standard deviation index, which is essentially your standard deviation, and then target score.
الشغلات اللي بتتقيموا عليهم هذول ال3 شغلات. Yes.
And ultimately, basically what all of them are looking at is how far away is the lab's result from the peer group target.
وهذول كلهم بتاخذوا من اللي هو من البير جروب. Yes.
So basically, in terms of the acceptable performance, in terms of where you should be in each one of those, the standard deviation, you should be within plus or minus 2. The target score should be greater than 50, and the percentage deviation should be less than the acceptable limits for that analyte. So the percentage deviation target is different for each analyte. Normally, most of those targets are based on clear recommendations, but that's how it's scored.
هو بيحكي لنا على الستاندرد ديفيشن بياخذوا منه من الستاندردز وراح يكونوا موضحين كويس ستاندرد اخذوا منهم. فهمتوا عليه؟ تارجت سكور.
انا حاولت القاء هذا على فكره.
What does the target score means?
Well, basically, I was going to come on it a bit more in a second, but essentially the target score is probably the best score to look at on RIQAS. One of the reasons for that is with the standard deviation and the percentage deviation, they're always plus or minus. So if you're looking at your means over a period of time, they can cancel each other out because you can be +2 1 month, -2 the next month, so your average is 0. So you think my result is perfect. So what target scoring looks at, it's always a positive number. So basically, if you have a score between 10 and 50, that's unacceptable. So that's a fail. Between 50 and 70 is acceptable. 70 to 100 is good. 100 to 120 is excellent. So if you have a target score of 120, that means your result that you generated in the lab for that analyte is almost exactly the same as the peer group target. So if you're running a Roche machine with 500 labs around the world and they all got an average of 20 for TSH, and you got a result of 20.1, chances are your target score is going to be extremely high. So it's all up. The target scoring is all about how far away are you from the peer group target, but it's always a positive number. So it's much better to look at over time and look at averages.
Yes. هو بيحكي انه تارجت سكور، فهمتوا عليه شو بالضبط؟ يعني مثلا اللي عمل
زي علامة النجاح ولا فوق
لا هنا مثلا اللي زي ما حكى TSH لما عملوها هم مقارنة بالبير جروب كانت كمثال اللي هو 120 نقول النتيجة، فأنت قديش قريب من ال 120؟ يعني هم حاطين لك احتمال زائد 2 أو ناقص 2 إنه السلقة تبعك. فالحين هذا مثلا أنت مثلا للTSH رحتوا أنتوا حاطين مثلا 110، فأنت هيك لازم بقول لك إن أنت تكون في الموجب مش في السالب، يعني ما تطلع عن التارجت سكور تبعتهم تبعت البير جروب.
النتائج بتطلع كلها طلعوا كلش لها معدلات. بيجي بقول لك التارجت سكور هذه بس لازم تكون يعني 50 اكثر منها. كل ما انت زدت عن 50 كل ما كنتي اكسلنت، كل ما عندك 50 معناها انك تعمل تحسين. اقل نتائجك بالمره مش مقبوله. يعني هي هذه اللي منها انت بتعرفي حالك انت وين، بس هذه بتاخذ من كل القيم اللي بياخذوها.
هو راح يكون موجود لكم زي هذه في الريبورت.
اخر بيطلع لكم اياها هو بس فيها معادله.
لا 50 لازم فوق ال 50.
يعني هو قصدي
مثلا 50
50 سيء.
والله انا مش فاهمها والله انه الحين هو معلش بس دقيقه عشان انا اشرح لك اياه. الحين كمثال انت مثلا الهيموجلوبين كان عندك مثلا قديش طلع؟ هدوني اي رقم فيها 13. هم كانوا لما هم عملوه في المصنع تبعهم كان 13، فانت لما عملت الفحص ممكن انت رحتي بعتي لهم اياه مثلا 5 أو 6، فبقول لك انت انا اكسبتبل تبعتك مثلا انت كانت 12.5، انت بتكوني مثلا في الرينج هذا في الاكسلنت. قديش قريبه انت من النتيجه اللي هم طلعوها؟
حتى 50 مش قيمه ثابته، انا فحص بده ينشغل،
بس لازم يكون اعلى انه عند الاكسبتبل وفوق مش تحت.
هو بيكون محدد هو محدد المكان
يعني
مش عن النص تقريبا من النتيجه اللي هم
يا جماعه الخير 50 نصهم
نص مثلا
according to what they choose 50
تقريبا نسبه تبعتها. بس يعني انت في كل الاحوال حتلاقي حالك اوفر ب 50. هنا انت بتطير من 1 ل 120 50% تبعتها قديش بتكون؟
بقولها زي علامه النجاح.
ايوه
acceptable like when it's acceptable
يعني حد لما يكسب
القيم اللي بتطلعوا في مرة.
So, Michael, why did you choose like a total score above 50?
It's target score, not total score, but it basically, I think essentially that it's a calculation that's done. It calculates what's the percentage deviation allowable for each assay and how far away is yours from it. So they've done some statistical calculation combined with ISO. Where 50 came from, I'm not entirely sure. But the critical thing to understand is sometimes people get confused that it's a percentage score. It's not. It's just that the score could be 500 to 1,200. The score, the numbers are kind of irrelevant. It's the categorization down the right-hand side. That's the critical point you need to figure out. So are you unacceptable, acceptable, good, or excellent? And basically, it just shows you how far away you are from the mean for comparison in terms of the peer group. I can send. There's a document which shows all the calculations and statistics, how they're calculated by RIQAS. So if people want to have a look through, they can.
ايش الكالكوليشن اللي بيعملوها لكل حاجه عشان انت لو بتشوفوها.
نظام كله هيطلع بال 50 زي هيك، من 50 ل 120.
انه قديش انتم النتيجه اللي دخلتوها مقبوله بالنسبه للنتيجه الاساسيه. فهمتوا علي؟ انه قديش مقبوله، فانت قديش الرينج تبعك؟ هل هي انت طلعتها مثلا هنا وكان الرينج تبعك جود، او طلعتها مثلا هنا وانت كنت بدك امبروفمنت عشان تطلعها؟ يعني زي علامه النجاح كانت 50 وفوقيها انت يا بتاخذ ممتاز يا جيد جدا يا جيد.
يعني هي التارجت سكورنج اكنها هي المين تمام، ومدى بعدنا عن المين هم بيعملوها بمعادلات، فبتطلع هذا انت
بتطلع فيها زي هيك وين انت بالضبط
يعني بعدك عن المين، بعدك عن المين يعني هي وفق طبعا هم معادلات.
بدل ما يحط لك نورمال رينج ده كله دراسات في 50 ل 120
يعني هي النتيجه الصحيحه او اللي لازم يكون فيها كانه بعدنا عن النتيجه الصحيحه.
اذا كنت انت على الخط ونتيجه نفس اللي هم عاملينه في المقر او العينه نفسها اللي بيعملوها، هذا انت راح تكون ممتاز وفي الاكسلنت.
So basically, they've done a whole bunch of statistical analysis and a lot of math, so you guys don't have to. So all you really need to understand is where they've assigned you, and that doesn't mean that if they've assigned you as acceptable, that you do not have room for improvement still.
إنه لو كنتوا في الأكسبتبل هذا راح برضه في عندكم عشان التحسين. Yes, Michael. They got it.
ماذا بعدنا عن
أيوة. Yes, Michael.
Okay, so basically then whenever you're looking at a individual page on a report, this is one of the top bit. This is the stats section laid out here. So this is an example of a lab who's running albumin. Then what they have here is basically the white is the all method. So this is everyone in RIQAS, regardless of what machine or instrument or method. So there's 5,000 participants in the last sample. It then shows you then what was the average concentration for that. Then it breaks it down. You can see then the green is the method. So basically this lab is running bromocresol green. So you can see here there's 4,500 labs running this method. And then there's this instrument. So basically this is the lab is running albumin and this lab is running an Abbott Alinity. So you can see then there's 183 labs running Alinity with bromocresol green. And then this is the number of labs reporting the result. And this was the average result to what then they're being compared with.
زي ما حكيت لكم في الاول هم لما بقارنوا بالميثود اللي انتم بتعملوها. فمثلا هذا مثال اللي هو البومين مختبر بيعمل عمل فحص الالبومين ووصل النتيجه. بقول لكم انه بحط لكم اي ميثود، يعني كل الطرق اللي انعمل فيهم هذا الفحص كانوا 5330 العدد، من بينهم كان هذا المين وكان هذا الارقام هذه. بيحكي تحت انه الميثود مثلا اللي انتم بتشتغلوا عليها هي مثلا
البروموكريسول مثلا جرين مثلا،
انتم قديش العدد اللي هو ممكن تكونوا انتم من ضمنه اللي هو ال 4509. استوعبتوا ايش قصدهم؟ هذه الجزئيه ايش معناها؟ يس يس.
So that's an example of a chemistry analyte. If you take this one, for example, this is an example of an immunoassay analyte. Because every immunoassay is essentially its own method, on immunoassay there's only two levels. There's either all method or your method. So it's a little bit different because immunoassay hematology, for example, there's only ever two options that you're compared with, whereas on chemistry there's three.
هو ايش بحكي لكم؟ بحكي لكم انه انتم راح يبين لكم ايش الطريقه تبعتكم وايش الجهاز اللي بتستخدموه، بس دائما بكون اللي هو الاميون اساي انه هي بتنشغل على كل الاجهزه تقريبا، فهو بس بحكي لكم ايش الطريقه اللي انتم اشتغلتوها لانه بكون هو الطريقه المختلفه لكن الاجهزه بتكون بشكل عام هي نفسها، صح؟
لانه قصدك البرنسبل بتاعتها واحده مثلا طريقه الجهاز.
لا مش شرط انه الجهاز اي توتال انه بيشتغل على الابوت الينيتي.
ماشي، بس في اجهزه ثانيه، في عندنا بتشتغل على الالايزر.
هذا تقييم الأبوت.
الينيتي لحالها بدنا ناخذ
هو ايش لانه اذا انت بتشتغل على الابوت الينيتي فهو فيش غير طريقه واحده بس، عشان هيك هو واحده.
ممكن تقولوا بس رنين المين هذا اللي ماخذه، هذا المين لكل النتائج المشاركين. تمام.
الاولى للكل والثانيه للتفصيل.
بس سريع السؤال هذا، هل المين هذا بعد ما بيقيم الاوتلايرز في احصائيات وبيجيب الويتد مين هذا المقصود فيه، ولا المين لكل النتائج بغض النظر عن الشغلات اللي طالعه اوت اوف رينج؟
So the mean in here it means like the mean or the calculated mean for all of the samples, even the outlier sample, or it's just after removing the outlier samples?
Yeah, well, basically, this is after the outliers. So essentially, we'll go through it in a second, but this number here is excluded participants. So basically, there's a calculation that Randox use, which essentially removes about 5% at either end of the bell curve. So it means that somebody that's ran the wrong sample, reconstituted incorrectly, their results are not included then. So basically, it's about 5% either side, they're excluded. So you can see here, if you calculate the numbers, these normally work out to be about 10% of what this number is. But yes, this is after the outliers are being excluded.
What is the deviation for U and M after the
I'll go through it in a second. There's slides that can show you.
يعني هو بقول كان همشي علينا يعني. Okay.
So yeah, so basically in the text section, so there's 3 lines of information. So we talked about the all method group, your methods, and then your instrument. It's color coded. So basically the minimum number of peer group for a comparison is 5. So you can see here, for example, for Avid Architect, there's 86. So that's 5. If you're using a more unusual machine or an unusual method and it goes to less than 5, that's not statistically relevant. So what happens is your comparison moves up a level. So instead of being compared with an instrument group, you're compared with the method group comparison. Obviously, that's not ideal because the method group might have more variation than if you're just in your instrument group. But that's why using a big EQA program like RIQAS is beneficial, because we're more likely to have a bigger number of labs using a wider number of machines and methods. So you're more likely to get a peer group.
لا هو حكى على الأجهزة إنه لازم يكون عددها أقل من الانسترومنت بير جروب لازم تكون أقل من 5. So it is the peer group for the panel itself or like overall?
So basically, for the reason why they have multiple methods is that it gives us multiple options of what you can then be compared with. Say, for example, you're using a machine that's not widely used and there's not a big enough peer group. So only maybe say 4 labs have returned a result. 4 labs is not for them for the say the average of those 4 labs was 5.5. You could say, well, that's not really a reliable mean for you to be compared with because there's not enough participants to be compared reliably. So what they then say is, right, rather than comparing you to an instrument comparison, we'll go up 1 method and go to the bigger group, which is the next one, which will be the method group. So rather than being compared with Avid Architect, say Avid Architect, there was only 4 here. That would mean then this would be green. Your mean for comparison would be the alkaline picrate deproteinization. So instead of being compared with this mean, you then compare with that mean instead. So it's never the ideal situation because ideally you always want to be compared with people using the same instrument, same method, same reagent, but it's better than nothing, I guess.
لكم انه الفكره هذا انه هو لما بيقارنكم زي ما حكينا بيقارن بالميثود اللي بتستخدمها الرياجنت اللي بتستخدمه بيقارن بالجهاز بس لو الجهاز تبعك يعني الحرب العالميه الاولى والناس بطلوا يستخدموه وانت لحالك انت واثنين اخرون يعني فبقول لك انت عندك المين هيطلع اقل من 5 لانه انت اذا الانسترومنت جروب تبعكم كان اقل من 5 مش هيكون بيعكس يعني ما في اصلا كومباريزن اقل من 5 هو بقول لكم انه راح يطلع ساعتها لو كان قليل مقارنه بالاجهزه راح يطلع لكم درجه بس للميثود راح تكون المقارنه بالميثود اللي بتستخدموها مش للجهاز بشكل خاص توقعتوا عليه؟ Yes.
And I think that's why the peer group size is so important because say for if we take this as an example, say here, forget that this is Avidity, pretend this was ELISA, for example, and maybe the peer group was only 4, and the mean was 4.44. Maybe this ELISA runs much lower than all other methods, but if there wasn't a sufficient peer group, rather than being compared with a mean of 4.44, they'd be getting compared with the mean of 5.38. So if they were getting a result of 4.44, then they would be scored badly if they're in the all method group. So again, that's why it's always best to be compared with the same instrument, same reagent, same assay, because it's more likely to be meaningful. Comparing yourself to an all method mean is less likely to be useful for anyone.
هو بيقول انه من الافضل نحن لما بنقارن نفس الجهاز نفس الرياجنت نفس الميثود، بس لو كان زي ما حكى نعتبره انه مثلا ممكن إلايزا تحت وكان العدد كثير قليل، بس المين كان عندك 4.44 مش هيكون بيعكس اللي انت بتشتغل بناء عليه، انه بس قارن لك بس على 3 او على 4 كبيرهم. فبقول لك رح تكون المقارنه بناء على اللي هو الطريقه بشكل اوسع اكثر من انه بس على الانسترومنت لما يكون بس عليكم 3 اللي بنقارن فيهم، فبكون ادق وين في الميثود.
And
Yes.
I think that's why RIQAS is the biggest EQA program in the world. There's 55,000 labs worldwide, and sometimes, you know, elsewhere in the Middle East, sometimes a private lab will be with RIQAS. They'll get a cheaper offer from another EQA scheme. They'll go to them for a year, and then after a year they'll come back. And one of the main reasons often is because they didn't have big enough peer groups, so the reports weren't as useful for them as they were with RIQAS.
هو بيحكي انه مثلا كمثال مختبر خاص كمثال في الشرق الاوسط، حس انه مثلا ممكن ريكاس الراندوم تكون كثير غاليه انه يشارك فيها، فراح دور على الشركات الثانيه اللي بتقدم عروض ارخص. بس هو بنفس الوقت احنا بنحكي على راندوكس اللي هو فيها 5000 مختبر حوالين العالم، فإلا ما يكون في بير جروب معينه انت ممكن تنضم لها. بس لما يروح على منظمات ثانيه او جمعيات ثانيه بتعمل نفس الشيء، بس مش هيكون البير جروب تبعها رقمه عالي.
I think it's just to give you an idea, elsewhere in the region, RIQAS is the most commonly used program. So it would be the most commonly used program in Jordan, in Kuwait, in Saudi, in Oman, and Qatar. So we have several thousand labs just in the Middle East using RIQAS. So it's useful to understand the regional usage as well.
وبحكي لكم بس في اللي هو في الريجن العربي، الأردن، قطر، الكويت، السعودية، يعني في أكثر من 1000 وشوية من اللي هو الدول العربية. فإلا ما يكون في البير جروب أكثر من Yes.
So yeah, this is what I mentioned before about apart from chemistry, most of the programs just have 2 levels of comparison, either your method and an instrument or all methods. So that's why you'll see 3 levels in chemistry and 2 on the other programs, but it's always color coded. So you can see here, if it's green, that means you're compared with Abelinity. If this was white, that would mean you compared with all methods, and that would be because the peer group would be less than 5.
هو ايش بحكي لكم كل في كل البانل رح تشوفوا 2، هو يا اما اقول ميثود يا اما على الجهاز او احيانا على البث بس الميثود. بس في الكيمياء رح تلاقوا 3 اسطر اللي هو دائما بتكون معلمه بالالوان، يعني اخضر لون ثاني كمثال ابيض رح تلاقوا ابيض تحت عشان تعرفوا تربطوهم ببعض. Yes.
So basically, in terms of what these other numbers mean, so you got n is the number of results. N is the number of results used to generate the mean. Then second is the mean, so that's the average of results. So that's the average result of the peer group. The CV is obviously the coefficient variation. The uncertainty of the mean, I'll come on to in a second, but essentially that's a calculation which gives you an idea of how reliable the mean is. So basically, the lower the number, that means the more reliable the mean. So essentially, you can see.
Yes.
So you can see here, for example, the number of participants was 86, and the CV was only 1.8%. So that's a very reliable mean because you have a large number of participants and a low CV. If on the other side you had 5 participants returning and the CV was 15 or 20%, if you're compared to that mean is less reliable because the statistics, there's more variation. So you can use the UM number to help assess, say if you're getting scored badly compared to your peer group, and the uncertainty of the mean is low, you can say, well, that mean is very reliable, so I should be doing better. If the mean is not reliable because of a low peer group number or a wide CV, then you're going to get a more uncertainty of the mean. Vitamin D is a good example. Tends to be quite wide variation in results. So sometimes, depending on the peer group size, the uncertainty of the mean can be higher with tests like that.
هو ايش بحكي لكم؟ بقول لكم انه الانسرتينتي اوف مين انه قديش في عدم دقه للمين. يعني هذا مثلا كان رقم 86 بس كان السي في عندك 1.8 يعني عدد كبير بس كان السي في قليل، فانت هنا عندك ثقه في المين اكثر لانه عدد كبير طلع تقريبا المين قليل مقارنه بانه ممكن يكون عدد مثلا 20 تلاقي انه السي في مثلا عندك لا العدد كان 5 أو 6 والسي في عندك طلع 20، هتعرف انه مش دقيق، فهتلاقي هذا يكون عالي، فكل ما قل هذا الرقم كل ما كان افضل. Yes.
Then we have standard deviation for performance assessment, which is basically just a target standard deviation score. It's not really relevant, it's just used as part of the calculations. And then we have the excluded results, the outliers, which I mentioned already.
الستاندرد ديفيشن فور performance اللي انتم عاملينه قديش بيطلع، وبقولكم يعني مش تستخدموه كثير بس لانه كان جزء من الحسابات احنا حطيناه وقديش كانوا في اكسكلودد من هذه المين. Yes.
So basically then, whenever you're looking at the next section of the report, you can see here the different numbers. So you have the standard deviation, the target score and the percentage deviation, which I mentioned already. What the RM numbers are is the running mean. So basically this is the average of the last 10 results. So whenever you're running with a new RIQAS participant, it'll take 10 months for the running mean targets or running mean calculations to be developed. So for the first 10 months of running the report, those numbers, all the RM numbers, we'll just say too few because there's too few results. After you've done 10 results, then it'll start generating those running means. And the running means are useful for looking at performance over time. So you can see, is this a random error? Is this a systematic problem that we're getting month after month?
الرننج مين هذا معناها انه قديش هو بيحسب لكم مثلا 10 اشهر كم مره انتم عملتوا العينات، بيحسب لكم كل مره المين وبيطلع لكم اياه كمعدل. انه الرننج مين لل SDI انه مقارنه بانه مثلا ال10 شهور اللي فاتت انتوا كل مره بيحسب لكم اياهم فهتلاقوه بيعلى، لكن انتوا اذا كنتوا جداد مش هتلاقوا في ارقام هذا. ليش؟ لانه بيحسب لكم على القدام اللي انتوا عملتوه والقديم، اللي انتوا عملتوه القديم فبيعلى عندكم الرقم.
سؤال يعني هنا مدارس الإيكاس متعدده. هو هنا بيحسب الاس دي اي بناء على اي ميثود، كونسنس ميثود، روتين ميثود، تارجت فاليو. ايش الاس دي اي بحسبها بناء على مين؟
So the SDI, what is the collection for the SDI?
Sorry?
The method of collection for the SDI.
The method of collection?
مدارس الإيكاس متعدده. في مدرسه التارجت فاليو، هم بيشتغلوا في الحسابات تاعتهم بناء على مدرسه التارجت فاليو في الايكاس ولا على الروتين ميثود ولا على الريفرنس؟
So he's asking which approach are you using for the SDI?
لا انزلك شوي زياده. الاس دي اي في طريقه الروتين ميثود وفي طريقه الكونسنس ميثود.
Like the routine method approach and the
اذا بده يحسب على التارجت فاليو بده يكون معناته الكلام الاس دي اي بتختلف نتائجها عن
حتى في الكالكوليشنز وبناء على
لا بس اسالي المدرسه اللي بيشتغل عليها في الإيكاس شو هي
What is
المدرسه؟
the approach that you are using in ECAS?
هي كونسنس ميثود او تارجت فاليو
Or target value or routine?
I'm not
target
quite-
score.
I'm not basically the standard deviation is basically the plus or minus 2 SD from the mean for comparison. So your lab should have a result within 2 SD either side of the mean for comparison.
انت فهمت عليه
سوري
محمد؟
مايكل سوري مايكل انا تقريبا فهمت السؤال. في ريكاس هم بيستخدموا اللي هو التارجت سكور. التارجت سكور كالكوليشن راح تاخذ في الحسبان المين والستاندرد ديفيشن. اوكي، ما في عندنا شيء اسمه تارجت فاليو از ا فاليو. الفاليو هي المين لكل البير جروب. اوكي، تارجت سكور حدد لك قديش انت التارجت سكور هو اللي بحدد لك قديش انت الريزلت تبعتك منيحه ولا مش منيحه. اهم فاليو انت راح تطلع عليه اللي هي التارجت سكور. اوكي،
يعني طريقه التارجت فاليو بتستخدم في الإيكاس.
يعني بتاخذ تارجت فاليو.
لا، هي اسمها تارجت سكور. هي التارجت سكور ماخذ فيها في الحسبان في الكالكوليشن تبعها اكثر من بارامتر. فهمت علي؟ ستاندرد ديفيشن زائد المين.
اوكي.
So I think with the running means, an important thing to remember is, like we talked about at the start, is that with the bring up the pointer option. So with the standard deviation and the running mean standard deviation, it's always a plus or minus number. So you can see here, for example, the running mean is worked out to be 0, but that doesn't really mean anything because you could be +1, -1, +1, -1. Same with percentage deviation. That's why the running mean, the most useful score to look at is the running mean target score, because these numbers are always positive. So if you're performing badly month after month, the score will be low. If you're performing well, the score will be high. So the running mean target score is a much more meaningful number to look at than either of these running means.
هو بيحكي لكم انه هنا في التارجت سكور كل شهر عن شهر اذا كانت نتائجكم منيحه راح تلاقوا الرقم بيزيد، لانه بيحسب لكم الشهور اللي قبل قديش كانت الريزلتس تبعتكم مع بعض بياخذها.
بيحكيش بالضبط، بس يرجع ثاني. هلا الارقام اللي بتيجي هذه بتعرف كنت وين، وانت مش مهم كيف حسب ولا ايش حسب. بالنهايه هذه معادلات وبرامج بيحسبوا من القيم كلها. بس اذا ما تيجي تلاقي ريبورت، هنا المهم تكونوا عارفين. يعني لما تلاقوا اول مره لسه كله صفار، معناها ليش احنا صفار؟ لانه لسه هو اول مره، فيش عندنا رنين، فيش عندنا حاجات تربويه تجينا كل على الباقي كل دوره. لكن لو التارجت سكور كان 120 تمام، وصل 120 بعد التراكمات صار مثلا لقيته حاطط 615، معناها قربت توصل للتارجت شوي شوي. بس هيدا مهم الريزلت، مهم بالنهايه تجيك الاشياء محسوبه وجاهزه.
هو ممكن يعني لا انت تعرف الشهور بعدين راح يديك الارقام على اساس انه تجمعكم في
يعني مش هيبعت لهم الارقام اللي فيها.
هو مش عارفه. So the number for the running mean it will be since the second round, the second cycle, or it will be like after 10 months.
It's 10 months, so you need to have 10 results. So for if labs,
عشان يبدا يطلع لكم اياه.
so if you started reporting.
شهر وبعد الشهر العاشر تبدوا تشوفوا حاجه. احنا حطينا هذا الناس على 10 18 كل شهر مثلا.
طب هل حيكون يا رنين في قيم على سبيل المثال لما نقول 115 تمام، بعد 11 شهر من التطبيق كان عندي 120 تمام، هل كل شهر حيجي مثلا ايش القيمه اللي المفروض احنا نكون عندها؟ كل مختبر حيكون هم حاطينها از كريفرنس فاليو، يعني انه هذه هيك اكسلنت
هي تارجت سكور. هو هذا بتحكي عليه تارجت سكور اللي راح يوصلهم، اللي
هو كل مختبر ايش وضعه بحيث ان هم يقدروا
النتيجه الصح يعني. بس
يكون بعد 10 شهور ولا
لا كل مره هذا لا
قيم تراكميه بعد 10 شهور
زي معدل التراكم.
Yes.
Okay, so one other thing that I hadn't mentioned yet, that on the statistics, this is an example of a blood gas report, but they're all the same. But the percentage deviation, it's different for each assay. So the target for the percentage deviation is listed here. So you can see here it says acceptable limits of performance for RIQAS, 14.10%. If you go through a RIQAS report, that target is different for each assay. And again, that's generally based on clear recommendations for target deviation. But that's how the percentage deviation is scored.
انه هنا بقول لك البرسنتج ديفيشن اللي بحط لكم اياه تحت راح يكون لكم الاكسبتبل قديش بناء على اي ستاندرد بالضبط وقديش راح يكون النسبه لكل اسي راح يكون موجود تحت.
هذا مش التارجت فاليو لازم يطلع نسب لازم يعطي نسبه من الى.
Yes.
Okay. So next chart that we'll look at will be the histogram. So basically this is color coded in the same way as the earlier parts. So you can see here you got the white, green and blue here. It's represented the white, green and blue here. So the white means all methods, the green is your method, and then the blue is your instrument. And then the triangle is where your result has fallen into, basically. So you can see here that these are all the results. These are the number of labs that have reported results. And then this is the concentration of the results. So it's useful to see where you fit in compared to your peer group and where your peer group fits into the other methods. So for example, if your method has a very significant bias compared to everyone else, you can see that on the histogram.
واش بحكي لكم هذا الهيستوجرام شفتوا فوق لما قال لكم الاول ميثود وايش الجهاز تبعكم بالضبط هنا تحت عكس لكم اياه في هيستوجرام عشان تفهموه انتم لما تشوفوه انه مقارنه كل الطرق وايش بالضبط الميثود اللي تتبعوها وين بالضبط اي جهاز تستخدمه فبحط لكم المثلث اللي تحت عشان يعرفكم انتم وين انه انتم ضمن البير جروب تبعتكم انتم بتطلعوا هنا
بس انه انت وين بس مش انعكاس للنتائج تبع لا
So it will not be a reflection for their like result.
حسب الطريقة اللي بتنشر العالمية.
So the black triangle in the bottom, it is their result. Where are they from all of the methods?
Yes.
هذا انتوا وين نتيجتكم مقارنة بنتائج العالم؟
بس تقولي له ايش الفحوصات الكيميائية اللي بيشتغلوها بطريقة التارجت ميثود؟ هل بيشتغلوا كل الكيمستري بطريقة التارجت ميثود ولا فحوصات معينة؟
هم محددين لكل شيء واحد
تارجت فاليو تارجت سكور بيشتغل عليها كل الفحوصات الكيميائية.
So there is like target score for each chemistry assay.
Well, yeah, I think it's important to understand the difference between, well, as in, it's not a target value. A target score is just a name that was created by Randox. They could just call it grading system or something like that. Basically, it's essentially just how far away is your result from the mean for comparison. So the peer group mean for that assay, how far away is your result, and then they grade you based on that.
هو سكورينج هو عبارة عن مصطلح من راندوكس هم اللي اخترعوه معناه انه قديش انت بعيد عن المين تبع البير جروب تبعك.
كأنها المين تاع نتيجة للغاية.
بالضبط. Yes.
So I think one of the requirements for ISO accreditation is that you need to have a scoring system. So basically that's why the scoring system is there, and we don't just make it basic plus or minus 2 SD, because that plus or minus 2 SD is not detailed enough. You need to have more metrics involved. So that's why the target score was created to help fulfill ISO accreditation requirements.
واحدة من متطلبات الايزو لهم كانت انه يكون في عندهم طريقة سكورينج خاصة فيهم لانه احنا لما بنحكي زائد او ناقص 2 ستاندرد ديفيشن تعتبر جدا يعني عامة فهم هذه السكورينج اللي عاملينه بس لهم عشان يبينكم انتوا وين بالضبط مكانكم بشكل ادق. Yes.
And I think that's one thing that we would find sometimes with labs who are CAP accredited or use CAP proficiency testing. CAP has a very loose target that you pretty much just have to be plus or minus 2 SD. So sometimes the lab might fail on CAP or pass on CAP, but fail on RIQAS. And that's because RIQAS has a more comprehensive scoring system. So it's a little bit harder to pass on RIQAS than it would be on CAP, for example.
وبيكون في كمان غير RIQAS في هو CAP.
بدنا نسال عليها
كيفوا انه الكاب ممكن بشكل بتنجحوا فيه، بس ريكس بيكون اصعب انه الواحد ينجح فيه ويكون ضمن السكورينج سيستم تبعهم.
So, you know, you can
الايزو والكاب كان كاتب يعني كانه مقارنه بين الايزو والكاب.
لا الريكاس والكاب.
لا في كتب بعدين
لا كلام ابو احمد هو الريكاس والايكاس والكاب.
على ايزو.
يس هو واحدة من الستاندرد كمان تابعة لنفس الشركة. Yes, Michael.
So you can see here just some other examples of histograms. You can see here where this particular group, this is probably, they have a positive bias on their method compared to the all method groups. So you can see that if you're running with your method, your results would be expected to be higher than the all methods. So this is also useful if you're comparing between labs. For example, a lab gets a TSH result from one lab, they go to another lab, get a TSH result, it's different, and they're saying who's right, who's wrong. You can look at the histogram chart as well as some other charts and see, would we expect differences between these methods?
وأنا بقول لكم إنه مثلا لو صاروا أنتوا مثلا هذا لما بيكون
if you have a patient and they've gone to 2 different labs and they've got 2 very different results for the same test and you're doing the troubleshooting for that.
Yeah, but say the 2 labs are using 2 different machines.
To look at what kind of methods you are using, what kind of methods they are using, and this is saying that there is a positive bias for one, which could explain why there is a difference on your equipment and their equipment. But I think that's what you're trying to summarize, right?
Yeah, it's just something that we would quite often see between labs where patients might be going and getting a result at 2 different labs, and they may not necessarily be using the same machines. So it might be expected that the results would be different, but often the patient doesn't understand that, or the doctor sometimes doesn't understand that because they're not from the laboratory. So this is kind of useful information. You can help explain this if anyone is questioning the results of a lab about why it's different, you know, who's right, who's wrong. That's my point.
إنه هو قصده لو مريض سأل على مثلا إنه
تعيين على مختبرين، كل واحد طلع نتيجة شكل.
بالضبط إنه
مين اللي فيهم صح بدك تفسر له بناء على المثل. نعم.
كويس كويس عنهم بالضبط.
لا أنا مش قصدي
What do you mean by positive bias in here?
Just as in your results are higher than the mean. So basically, you can see here most labs are getting a result of around 97, where this particular group are getting results between 106 and 110. So their results are higher than the mean.
Based on the kind of equipment and the testing. So you can see that all of the people, all of the labs that were using this equipment or this method, they were all having a positive bias. So the equipment and the method, it's not that the laboratory technicians themselves might be doing anything wrong. It is more the method and the bias is more this way, whereas somebody in your other lab might be using a different method, a different instrument, and they might be more the other way. This is another good reason not to cheat off each other.
هو نيجاتيف بايس هتكون على الناحية الثانية. طيب ايش الفرق لما هو ايش بيقول لك انه هتقدر توضح لاي حدا بيجي يسالك يقول لك ليش هناك كانت نتيجتهم مختلفه عنكم بس انتوا الاثنين نجحتوا، ليش نتيجتكم مختلفه؟ عشان هيك بقول كنتوا ما ترنوش على بعض تسالوهم. لانه هذا بيستخدم
ممكن اتدخل.
اذا بتختلف المواد بتختلف
فهو بس هذا عشان اي حدا بيسالكم توروا. فهمتوا كيف؟
وقصده البوست بايز انه واحد كان غلط كلياتنا عملنا زي فكلياتنا طلع نفس المضاد فائد علمي.
ممكن رنين
This could be hundreds and thousands of different labs around the world, all using the same instrument and the same reagents. They're all getting a positive bias because their equipment and their test gives a slightly higher result than other methods and other equipments.
حطوا عليها سنين.
اختلاف الاجهزه والمواد يا جماعه هو لو نفس الجهاز نفس المواد ممكن تكون عليها 6 سنوات.
Please not to cheat off your friends because they might be using a different test and a different reagent and they will have a different bias. So we would
بس عشان
مثال بسيط جدا، يعني مثلا ناس بتشتغل اليوريا بالكاينتيك وناس بتشتغل بالكالوريمتريك، هذول لهم لو اشتغلوا كل المجموعه هذه بالكالوريمتريك حيكون لهم اساسيات بيختلف عن الناس بتشتغل بالكاينتيك، وبالتالي هذول يشتغلوا صح وهذول يشتغلوا صح. بس مش
هذا نفس الطريقه ونفس الجهاز هنا، فممكن طريقه ثانيه جهاز ثاني يكونوا على ناحيه مختلفه.
أنا إيش
Yes, Michael.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's why it's very important to understand that the vast majority.
صح.
قد يكون البوزيتيف بايرز اللي هو مثلا شيء بلس ماينس مثلا.
How we determine the positive bias in here? How we can if it's a positive bias or negative bias?
Well,
That's what they're asking.
Well, again, this you wouldn't necessarily use this chart in great detail to interpret your own results. You would just use it as a bit of a helping hand. Some of the other charts that we'll show you in a minute, you'd use more for assessing your own lab. This is just useful to give you a bit of an idea and an overall picture of as to where your method fits in with other methods. But personally, I don't use this chart that much. I use the other charts, which I'll show you now in a minute.
راح يوريكم تشارتات ثانيه عشان تفهموا اكثر، وكل انا ما بستخدمش هذا التشارت بس عشان يوضح لكم انه كيف ممكن كل الطريقه نفسها والاجهزه نفسها يكونوا على ناحيه مختلفه عن الطرق والميثود الثانيه. Yes.
So you can also see is there any problems with registration to some extent that you can see here if your lab was here in this group, you can see here this is the number of labs reporting results. So you can see here most of your peer group are here. So this suggests to me that you're registered incorrectly. Maybe you picked the wrong method whenever you've been registering, or you picked the wrong machine. And maybe you should actually be in a different method that corresponds more with the all method peer group. Same with this group of labs here. So it helps you identify, are you an outlier or not?
هو ايش قصده هذا؟ عشان تعرفوا انا ليش اللي انا ببعث لكم عشان كمثال انه انتم مثلا كبير جروب واحد شخص منكم اختار ميثود مختلفه عن المجموعه، زي ما حكينا الريجنت نفسها اللي انتم كلكم بس في كل واحد مختلف اختار ميثود مختلفه، فهنا راح يبين انه انت راح تكون في جهه وكل مجموعتك الثانيه في مكان ثاني. عشان هيك احنا قاعدين بنأكد انه ايش هي الميثود اللي بتستخدموها، ايش هي عشان تكونوا كلكم نفس البيئه. على نفس ما حكى هنا الاوتلاير كمان اللي برا نفس الشيء، يعني ممكن اخترت ميثود مختلفه تماما عن اللي انت المفروض تكون فهمتوها؟ يس.
لا هو بشكل عام يا جماعه احنا عفوا المواد اللي احنا بنستخدمها تمام اللي بتتوزع معظمها نفس الشيء الا يعني الانسترومنت بتختلف. انت عندك مثلا كيمستري بلازما تختلف.
It should be like different, but the same reagent should be the same method.
Yes, because ultimately, if you're running, it doesn't matter what country you're in, whether you're in South America, Australia, or whatever. If you're using a Roche machine, a Roche reagent, and a Roche calibrator, and we're sending you the sample, you should all get the same result. Theoretically, that's the whole idea.
هو بحكي لكم انه بغض النظر ايش الجهاز اللي بتستخدموه انتم في اي مكان في العالم، في استراليا، في اسيا ولا هنا، كنتوا بتستخدموا روش والريجنت تبعت روش والكواليتي كنترول تبعت روش، راح تكون نتائجكم مقارنه فيهم. Yes.
Okay, so then the next table is the multi-method stacked section. So basically what this just shows you is the number of participants in the program for that sample. This is especially useful in immunoassay because you can see what other methods are represented and what are their results. It's useful if you're comparing, again, two different labs using two different machines. Would we expect that the means would be different? You can see, for example, if you have a lab or a patient that was getting a vitamin D done on Roche vitamin D3, the average result on the same patient sample is 13.8. if they were doing on the same sample on a SNIB, the result would be 27, so almost double. Neither's right, neither's wrong. It just, that's the difference in the standardization. So you can see that would be the difference in a typical patient result.
هو ايش بحكي لكم؟ ممكن الميثود تختلف تماما. هو في هذه شغله منيحه انه هم راح يعطيكم كل الطرق اللي بتشغل عليهم هذا الفحص، وفي نفس الوقت قديش كان العدد اللي فحصوا عليه وقديش كان المين. هو بقول لك انت لو رحت مثلا على اي مستشفى كانوا بيعملوا فيها على الروش فيتامين دي توتال 3 وكان المين فيها 13.8، بس انت رحت تعمل نفس الفحص على مثلا مستشفى ثانيه ميثود ثانيه واللي هي كانت السنايب انالايزر هتكون 27. فممكن المين يختلف
حسب اختلاف الميثود.
بدك ترجع للميثود اللي شغال عليه.
Yes.
And I think as well, this is a useful chart if you're comparing between machine brands. Say, for example, you're trying to decide what machine you will go for the next time you have the opportunity, or you have two choices of two machines in the lab. So you can see, for example, here on the same sample on 150 participants, the CV with the Abbott vitamin D assay was only 5.3%. So that suggests that this assay is very reproducible. With the Roche vitamin D on the same sample, the CV is 20%. So you can conclude from this that the Abbott method is better than the Roche method in terms of reproducibility. So you might say, if I have the choice to use Abbott vitamin D instead of Roche vitamin D, maybe you might do that.
هي ايش بتحكي؟ بقولكم انه مثلا كمثال لو عندكم خيار انه لو بدكم تشتروا جهاز على المختبر معين، ممكن من هنا تعرفوا اي جهاز ممكن يكون فيه اكثر ادق او غيره. زي ما حكى اللي هو الابوت اركيتكت كانت السي في تبعته 5.3 بس، لكن مقارنه بنفس الفحص على جهاز الروش كان 20 السي في فيه. فهيك بديك فكره مين الاجهزه اللي بيكون شويه فيها دقيق اكثر.
The auditors, remember we kept asking, is this result traceable back to the instrument which the result came from? This is why, because different reagents, different equipment give you different results, which means different can be interpreted differently for the patients if they have very different.
فاكرين لما كنا في الاوديت كانت واحده من الاسئله هل النتيجه اللي هي طالعه بنقدر نربطها باي جهاز طلعت من عشان نفس الشيء هتبين لكم انه قديش ممكن من هنا نعرف قديش دقه هذا الجهاز في النتيجه اللي طلعت. من قبل فكرت. Yes.
And I think as well, whenever people are doing troubleshooting on EQA, one of the first things we always ask is what QC are you actually using? And quite often, for example, RIQAS, whenever we decide our concentrations that we're going to give to labs, we decide them based on a biochemistry advisory board. So they suggest what are the clinically relevant concentrations that we should be testing at. Sometimes we find with a QC that's from the same brand as the machine. So for example, a Roche QC, the manufacturer of the machine will not pick a very difficult concentration for their machine. They won't give you too low, they won't give you too high. They'll give you something nicely in the middle so the performance looks okay. So the QC will pass and you'll say the machine's okay. Whenever you get a low patient sample or whenever you get a low EQA sample, the performance of the machine is not as good. So you'll see maybe a failure on RIQAS that you wouldn't see in your QC. So that's why whenever you're looking at performance of EQA versus QC, think about what is the level of sample, what's the concentration of sample compared to the QC sample.
وبيحكي عن تركيز العينات انه كيف راح يكون مختلف ما بين مثلا الكواليتي كنترول اللي انتم بتدخلوه على الجهاز، قديش ممكن تركيزه لو اختلف، لانه احنا بنحكي مثلا انه الايجنت مثلا اللي بتدخل الكواليتي كنترول اللي بنعمل كل يوم الصبح ممكن على تركيز معين يكون تابع لمين للمانيفاكتشر اللي عمله كان بالتركيز هذا، بس احنا برضه لنفس الكواليتي كنترول لازم يكون على تركيز معين عشان لما نشتغل عليه يطلع لنا نتائج. فقديش انه التركيز على بعض. Yes.
قديش التركيز من البولز بتختلف عن الريفرنس فاهم.
So how much is the concentration is different than the
Yeah, so So for example, if a Roche troponin assay, the Roche troponin assay has a cutoff of 14 nanograms per liter. The QC that Roche provide is 30 nanograms per liter, so more than double what the cutoff is. And that's because the CV of the Roche assay is 20% at 13. So basically, whenever you get a result that's 13, 14, the CV and the imposition of the assay is much wider. So if we give you an EQA sample at 13 or 14, you would expect that the imposition is going to be more. If you look at your QC, the QC is at a much higher level, so the performance is going to be much better. So quite often, because Randox we sell QC as well, sometimes what happens is a lab will start using RIQAS after 6 months or 12 months. They've seen all the problems that they're having with their lab that their first-party QC is not giving them. And then they start using Randox QC or Biorad QC after that because they realize they should have a third-party internal control and not just the control from the manufacturer.
مين عليه ايش حكى؟ طيب الحين ايش بقول لكم انه في اللي هو السكند بارت اللي حكينا عليها باول حاجه الكواليتي الكواليتي كنترول، انه احنا مثلا الجهاز اللي احنا عندنا كمثال جهاز روش زي ما حكى، فاحنا بنجيب الانترنال كواليتي كنترول تبع روش وبنشغله على الجهاز، فهو ممكن الكونسنتريشن تبعه لانه حكى الكونسنتريشن تبع الرياجنت والكونسنتريشن تبع الكواليتي كنترول، ممكن انه احنا لما بنديكوا السامبل بتكون الكونسنتريشن تبعها مختلف، لانه حكى انه 30
بالواحد بالاثنين مو
فالفكره انه دائما احسن انه احنا ناخذ ثيرد بارتي شخص مختلف عن المانيفاكتشر نشغل عليه الانترنال كواليتي كنترول، لانه هذا بيدينا برضه فكره انه ممكن المانيفاكتشر الكونسنتريشن تبعه يختلف
يعني
يكون
الفكره يا رنيك لو كنت انا بستخدم مثلا عندي مواد راندوكس بشتغل فيها على الاجهزه تمام، الكواليتي كنترول لما يكون من هيومن على سبيل المثال يكون افضل لل
اخر سنه على طول الوقت انت الكواليتي كنترول تبعتي كويس، لكن لما تيجي استنى الكواليتي كنترول بيطلع
يعني كل شركه بتعمل الكواليتي كنترول تبعها على الريجن تبعها
هيك بتتفلس الايرور ممكن الايرور عندك ثابت يكون يا ريجنت كنترول ماتيريال يعني
صحيح.
I think as well, sometimes there can be confusion, but it's important to external quality control is kind of a general term. What we would say is external quality assurance is EQA, it's RIQAS. If you're talking about a third-party internal control, different to the manufacturer, that's a third-party control. But sometimes in some countries, the phrase external quality control, sometimes people get confused. That means EQA. Sometimes they think it means third-party controls. So that's why we prefer to use either third-party internal controls or EQA whenever we're talking about the two different types. Okay. The next.
Can you repeat again because we didn't get it from here.
So basically, I'll show you back at the start. So sometimes people will, we would describe RIQAS as being an EQA program, external quality assurance. Then you've got your daily control. And then if you're running daily QC, that can be a first party QC, for example, Roche QC, Roche reagent. Third party QC would be Randox or Biorad. Sometimes people would call that external quality control. And then sometimes people get confused between a third party internal control and an EQA program. They're two completely different areas. So just whenever people say external quality control, I'm always keen to point out what do they actually mean by that? Are they talking about third party internal control or an EQA program, because they're totally different?
هو ايش بيحكي؟ اللي احنا بنعمل هو يعتبر external quality control. ممكن انه في ناس كانت بتتلخبط، دول الناس اللي بيشتغلوا انه الديلي كواليتي كنترول الفيرست بارتي اللي هو احنا بنشتغل كمثال على روش بنستخدم الريجنت والكواليتي كنترول تبع روش، فممكن بقول لك انه ناس اللي بيستخدموا ثيرد بارتي زي مثلا الجهاز لروش والريجنت لروش، بس احنا بنستخدم الكواليتي كنترول تبع راندوكس، فبقول لك في ناس بتلخبطوا وبقول لك انه هذا الثيرد بارتي هو يعتبر اكسترنال كواليتي كنترول، بس هو مش، هو بس يعتبر انترنال كواليتي كنترول.
بغض النظر عن
بقول
الشركات.
العينات اللي
بس الثيرد
بيبعتوها
بارتي مش
العينات اللي
فليك
بيبعتوها
السبب.
العينات اللي بيبعتوها بول سامبل ولا كنترول سامبل في الريكاس لما بيوزع عينات
So the panels that you are sending, it is a pool sample
sample or control
or
sample
control sample.
with reference value.
Can you say that again?
This is the external quality assurance panel that we're talking about. Yes, trained on that. The controls that you're mentioning are the internal controls for the machines. So some of your chemistry machines, you have that method controls that you're using. That is an internal control. What we're being trained on at the moment is the external quality assurance panel, efficiency testing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, basically an EQA program is a blinded sample. So it's a blinded sample and your target is the peer group. The reason I just bring it up is sometimes people get confused and they'll say, I'm running external control. And what they mean is they're running an internal control from Randox or Biorad. But just because you're running a control from Randox or Biorad, unless it's an EQA scheme, that doesn't mean it's really external. But really, ideally you should run both. The ideal scenario is that you've got a third-party internal control, so you have independence in your IQC, and then you run an EQA program as well. That's the ideal scenario. But just so people, because sometimes people get confused that if they're using a third-party internal control, that's an EQA, but it's not. It's totally different.
Okay.
رنين بس سؤال لو سمحتي تعقيبا على السؤال ابو احمد. العينات اللي هو انت ابو انس حكى انه العينات حتجينا احنا نحلها. طيب ما هو او احنا نحلها
يا اما بتيجي محلوله وجاهزه بس هي
ابو انس احسن اللي هي محلوله
What is the nature of the sample that it's going to be provided to them, like in the cycles, in the panels? If it will be lyophilized or
yeah, most of the chemistry, the immunoassay, etc., are lyophilized. Ones like hematology aren't, just because it's the nature of it. But generally, they're human material. Most of
بس قصدي يعني احنا ما بنخضعش للخطا. هذه قصدي انا ما بنخضعش للخطا. انا هدي صليت
لا بتكلم في العينه اللي جابها ليفولايز بعطيك بروشور فيها بقديش لازم تحطيها.
يعني برضه برضه في عندنا
brochure, like what is the consent, how it is
ممكن بس تسالي تقولي مش اللي بيعمل على ايش بحاسب المختبر في الريت.
لما ندخل للعينات اللي هو توصيفه هو في عنده 100 سلايد تقريبا.
انا بس بدي ارجع للسلايد بتاعت الكوفيشنت هل كل فصل هيجينا فيه كل
اللايف المرحله الثانيه
If all the assays will come with coefficient variation.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
So all of the tests that they are participated in the panel, it will come with the coefficient variation for all of the method.
Well, yeah, in the charts, it'll tell you what the CV of the results are. Essentially, what they receive is 6 samples for half the year. So basically, that's 1 sample for July, 1 for August, 1 for September, 1 for October. They run that 1 sample, they report the result, and then they get the report. That's how it works. So they essentially just need to treat the sample like a patient sample and run it in the same way that they would any other, and it's 1 sample per month.
Like, are you planning to go through like the receiving procedure and what they're supposed to do with them and how to run them in another presentation, or should we cover this?
Well, I think we might be short of time today. I was going to show some examples of the website in a minute. Mohammed, can you remind me what's the situation with the registrations at the moment? Are they still in process?
Yes.
I think it is. Yeah, most of it is ready. We are just waiting for the clinical chemistry to finalize it.
Okay, but the login details and things like that have been sent out already?
Yes, yes,
okay.
Yes.
And then what about assay registrations? Has that started yet, or that's pending?
We started it just, yeah.
Okay.
I think Ranin finished it, except maybe some questions for clinical chemistry.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think Mohammed has good experience with the website and doing the registration process and things like that. So he can definitely help on that as well. There is a user guide for RIQAS.net for the RIQAS website that I can send around as well. Once you have an idea of how it works, it's pretty self-explanatory.
I think everybody here is just so new that they haven't got a concept of what we're sending to them at the time. So the results are a little bit abstract at the moment without having seen the website, without having seen the registration and all of this also.
Yeah.
So I think everybody is now kind of asking, like, what's the format of the test? Does the packaging come with instructions on how to reconstitute the samples? How do they handle them? Like, because obviously when you get a Randox control, you get like the data sheet. So I think they're thinking like they'll get the data sheet to compare it to, which is kind of the opposite way around. We get the sample, then you send the results back, which is almost like the data sheet with the results in it. So
yeah, well, maybe what I'll just do now, I'll just quickly, there was a couple of slides at the end, but I'll just show the website very quickly so they get a bit of an idea. So let me share my screen. So essentially, every registration is registered to one email address. So that's one set of login details. So basically, so sometimes labs will get confused and say, well, I don't have my login details. It's only one login per lab. So basically that each lab would then log in using the same login details.
They are already, all of them logged in to their accounts.
Okay. So then whenever you would log into the RIQAS account, so I just have a demo account here. So whenever you log in, then it will basically show you this this screen. And the kit inserts are not included with the kit. So what they should do is go to, I think Mohammed can circulate them as well, but then they can go to RIQAS kit inserts. And then from here, they can pick the relevant kit insert for their program. So for example, if we want to look at the monthly immunoassay program, it's 9130, they click that, and then it basically opens the network error. Don't know what's going on, but that's where they would get the kit inserts from. But again, Mohammed can circulate the kit inserts by email as well. Again, I think Mohammed can. Sorry.
هي بتقول لكم انه الكيت انسرت هتلاقوها موجوده على الموقع، بتفوتوا بتدوسوا على الريكاس كيت انسرت، ومنها شفتوا انتم كل الانرولمنت كان مكتوب عليها رمز تحت انه ايش الرقم تبع البانل، ومنها بتجيبوا الكيت انسرت. يعني 128 كان كيمياء.
So then whenever you're doing the assay details, which I think Mohammed is helping with, it's in the assay details section. So then what you would do, it would open up the number of programs that the lab is registered with. So if we take this as an example, this is a lab. This is a lab who are registered with Abbott. Yes. And then if they wanted to add a new parameter, you just click add new parameter. You select which parameter it is.
البارامتر تبع كل فحص فيكم، انا ضفت لكم اياهم كلهم، يعني بدينا اول جهاز لكل واحد فيكم كله مضيوف.
And then you enter the details of what method, what instrument, the reagent supplier, and the unit, and that's how basically you add the details.
الميثودز اللي انتم اخترتوها ضفت لكم الانسترومنت، الرياجنت، وكل حاجه ضفت لكم اياها، انتم بتفوتوا وتعدلوا. So if they want to change a reagent or something, they will go and change from here.
Yes, you can change it from the website as well. So it's very important that sometimes labs will be registered with one machine or one reagent, and they move to a new brand or a new method, and they forget to change their RIQAS. They report the result based on the old parameters, and then basically their mean for comparison, their peer group is totally different. So it's giving them a feel because they haven't updated their reports. So
تأكدوا إنه الرياجنت اللي دخلتوا عليه النتيجة هو نفسه اللي أنتم مسجلينه، لأنه لو دخلتوا كان الرياجنت مختلف أنتوا هتكونوا في مجموعة مختلفة غير اللي أنتم بتشتغلوها. Yes.
And then this is where they'd also enter their results as well.
Data entry تاخذوا اللي هو
So
بعدين essay details. أيوة.
You go to data entry, enter results, then you pick which program it is you're entering results for.
بتدخلوا النتائج تحطوا data entry وبعدين enter result.
So you can see here, it says here current sample is due the 31st of July. So then they would enter it in, and then they would just type in their results for each one of the analytes that they're registered with.
مش الدخله ده بالسنايب صح؟
هو أول جهاز لكم كلكم عشان التسجيل بعدين بنزل الباقي. Yes.
And then what happens is that they get the report automatically is sent to their email address. But if they want to go into their account, they can also look at the reports for the current cycle and the previous samples in this section, so they can basically bring up and see what is the current report. So then they'll pull it up here, and it'll show them their results. Essentially, this is a demo account. That's why they're blank, but that's how it works. So yeah, that's basically that's the main part of the website. Entering results, assay details, accessing reports, accessing charts.
بتدخل نتائج من enter result. فهمتوا عليش حكاية كيف بتدخلوا الريزلت كل واحد بسجلته.
ليش المايكرو هنا بيفتحش؟ أنا عنده المايكرو بيفتح.
So can you show us again how to do it, how to take the report?
Yeah. Oh. The reports are in PDF reports, then routine reports.
Oh.
And then you select which program, which registration. So basically, what happens on RIQAS is each lab is assigned a number. So this is normally it's 6 numbers. So for example, this lab number is 324873. Then the first registration will be A. So that'll be for the first instrument or program. Then the next one will be B. The next one will be C, etc. So that's
A, B, C مثلا.
So say for example,
رقم الجهاز نفسه، رقم المختبر وبعديها رقم الجهاز A, B, C. Okay.
So if for example the lab is using one program, that's chemistry, and they have 2 instruments registered, that will show as 2. There'll be the first one will be A, the second will be B. Yes. If they're then also registered for immunoassay and they're registered with 1 instrument for immunoassay, then that will probably be C, and etc. So it means then basically if they're entering results, they should go into each one of those accounts and enter the results relevant to that instrument.
يتأكدوا إنه مثلا الحين إحنا حكينا رقم المختبر وبعدين A اللي هو أول جهاز B ثاني جهاز. بتاخدوا تدخلوا النتائج تبعت A أول واحد بالبرايمري للA الثاني للB عشان ما تلخبطوش فيهم. الناس اللي مسجل 5 أجهزة Yes.
Okay, so I'll go back to the slides just to show some of the other charts that they'll be expecting to see. The next one.
Yes.
The next chart is basically the Levi Jennings chart. So this would be essentially the same as a Levi Jennings chart for internal QC would be. On these charts, the furthest one on the right is the last result. So you can see this lab has been running. This shows the previous 20 results. This lab's been running for 20 samples, and then you can see the performance over time. It's shaded, so you can see here the SD. You've got 0 to 1, 1 to 2, and greater than 3. So you can see here the shape, the color coding on the left-hand side. So anything above 2 is then a failure. So you can see this lab actually has quite good performance over time. All of their results are within plus or minus 1 SD.
هذا ايش بحكي لكم انه كل ريزلت تروح تعملوها رح تيجي تلاقوها في هنا على كنقطه وكل شهر رح ينحطوا جنب بعض.
كل
مرة مش كل شهر.
يس
بكل
اللي احنا بنسجلها
هو عدد السامبل.
So you can see here at the bottom the sample number. So sample 3. So generally most of the programs they run from January to December. So normally sample 3 would be March. That would be then February, January, December, November, going back in time. If there's an N there, that means no result. That means the lab didn't submit a result for that sample. So that's why those say N, and you can see that there's a gap there from where they didn't submit a result.
انه تحت انه كل سامبل كمثال في بانلز تيجي كل شهر بتكون كل شهر يعني ممكن رقم 3 يكون شهر 3.
If you miss a result in the first 10, does that mean that they won't get their running total until 11 or 12?
Yes. So if they missed the sample like before the 10th, so they will need until December, like until the 12th, to take like the running mean.
Yeah, well, it would be if you missed, you would get it on the 10th. So once you have 10, then on the 10th, the running means will be generated. So if you missed one, then it would be after on the 11th report that you've done would be generated. In terms of sometimes people will ask if I've missed samples.
Yes.
Sometimes people will ask if I've missed samples, will I still get a certificate of participation? The rule is that you need to have submitted 50% of the samples which you're registered for in order to get the certificate of participation. So it is possible for you to miss samples and still get the certificate. It's just not recommended.
وبقول انه في ناس بيسالوا انه هل تاخذوا اللي هو شهاده المشاركه انه بعد قديش هو لازم 50% من العينات توصل لازم ناخذ نتائجها بعدين نديك اللي هو شهاده المشاركه طبعا غير شهاده الاداء هذه.
شهاده المشاركه
هنا حرف الان اللي تحت معناها انه ما فيش عينه نعملها سبمشن لهذول الشهرين. Yes.
Okay. The other thing to bear in mind at the top, it doesn't matter too much, but it can be useful for interpretation. What these numbers are is the mean for that sample. So you can see here the average or the peer group result was 20.271 and going back in time. Then what the I is for is that means that your comparison group is I for instrument. So you can see here the whole way along, the lab is being compared to their instrument group. The reason why they include that is that sometimes if you have a peer group that you're around the 5 mark, so maybe 1 month, only 4 people submitted results. So that means then you're compared with the next level up. So maybe you're getting a failure because of the peer group size. So that's why that, but most of the labs don't pay too much attention to it, just so you know what it means.
انا بحكي لكم ايش يعني هدول الارقام اللي فوق. الاي معناها ان انتم تقارنتوا على الانسترومنت هذا المين اللي فوقيها انه قديش كان المين لهذه العينات بهذا الشهر. Yes.
Yeah, so you can see here the N here for no result. C means corrected. So if you generally it's not possible to correct results only if you've submitted basically where you've like a transcription error. So you typed in, you swap around total and direct bilirubin. It's possible to get that corrected, but apart from that, it's not possible to get the others corrected.
سي هو كوركتد يعني لو تم تصحيح
هذا الاي حيتغير من عمليه ايش
بالضبط. يعني ممكن لو كان في شهر انه الانسترومنت مثلا اقل من 4 الفير جروب راح يقارنوك على اللي هو الاول ميثود فراح يكون الحرف مختلف الاي. لا مش بقول لك اي جروب كونت الحين مش هو حاط لك الريزلت هنا حط لك الريزلت، بس في نفس الوقت بقول لك انت في اي جروب تمت المقارنه بناء على هذا الريزلت.
إذا كان عدد الحقان تبع
الميثود
الحقان لأنه فيش كان في أقل من 5 فيش 5
حكينا عليه.
هذا حقان تبع الأولويز الرمز هيخلص.
هذه هي هذا yes.
Okay, so the next chart then is the target scoring chart. So this is always a very useful one to look at because I think target score is the most useful score on RIQAS. So again, this is the same scale that we showed before. 0 to 50 is a fail, 50 to 70 is acceptable, 70 to 100 is good, 100 to 120 is excellent. So ideally, you always want to be in this excellent range as much as possible. So you can see in this particular lab.
ليش قد ما بتقدروا يعني؟ احنا حنطلع هو غلط. We will be far exceed excellent.
Sorry?
Far exceed excellent.
Yes. So sometimes again, people get confused. Why is it why is the maximum not 100? It's because it's not a percentage system. It's based on, you know, we could have picked any number or any classification. They just had to pick something. It's like a school grading system, basically. So you can see, am I grade A, grade B, grade C, grade D, etc. So that's what target score is.
مدارس.
So really, what you want to see is improvement over time. And I think that's the key thing, is that if you're using RIQAS properly, you can improve your results, which ultimately improves the patient accuracy and the patient results. So this is an example. There's been, in the past year, there's been over 1,800 labs around the world that they've been able to improve their running mean target scores by more than 50. So that's like a very big jump where you're going for a huge improvement in performance. So that's the key thing, is that what you want to be seeing is improvement over time. Sometimes I get asked in some countries that we want a ranking system, show who's the best lab, who's the worst lab. But ultimately, you could have 8 really good labs, but you could have 8 really bad labs, and whoever's first or last in that group is subjective to the group. So that's why you really just need to be thinking about, how am I comparing with the peer group? And am I improving over time, or am I getting worse?
وراح يكون في تقييم النقطة السكور تبعك اللي كانت قبل واللي وراها واللي وراها، هل في تحسين بيصير ولا أنت نفسهم؟ اللي فوق حكى إنه كان في الرننج مين تحسين تبعه، لقوا إنه في عندهم أكثر من 50 مختبر كان في تحسين، وكان في قديش عدد الانسيدنتس اللي هم شافوها ما بين في عملية التحسين هذه. ملاحظين الرقم قديش؟
This is another tool in your quality management system for improvement. This isn't a standalone, it is part of our overall program of improvement. You're using this, you're using your knowledge of your corrective actions, your root cause analysis, your equipment maintenance, all of this to improve these scores and improve the patient testing, okay?
يعني هذه مش بس شيء بنعمله عشان ناخذ النتيجة وخلص. يعني بنقول إن أنتم بتستخدموا كل المعلومات اللي أخذتوها، إن أنتم كل ايرور بتاخذوه بتعملوا عليه روت كوز اناليسيس، نون كونفورميتي، كوركتيف اكشن، تبدوا تدخلوها. هي اداه هتساعدكم في الامبروفمنت في الكواليتي عندكم في المختبرات.
هي بشكل عام تبدا حتى من ادخال الداتا وادخال البروسيجر، ادخال الجهاز اللي انت بتشتغل عليه، انت صح اللي رجعت اللي انت بتشتغل عليه، البروسيجر اللي انت بتشتغل عليها، زي ما قال ابو احمد تو يوريا كاينتك ولا متريك، حتى لو كانت من نفس الشركه. فهذا الكلام بينعكس على النتائج اللي هتطلع، بالاضافه طبعا لموضوع الكوركشن اكشن وكل تبعاته من مواد واجهزه والتبريد والنقل واي شغله والعينات.
وضل 3 دقائق في الاجتماع
عشان تعملوا تحسين.
يا
كل هدف البرنامج تحسين.
يس مايكل.
So then the next chart would be the percentage deviation by sample chart. So this is linked to the percentage deviation scores you get here. So you can see the standard deviation is linked to the Levi Jennings. The target score is linked to the target score chart, and the percentage deviation is linked to the percentage deviation chart. So basically what this shows you, again, this shows the target deviation. So you can see for this particular assay, the target deviation is to be plus 6.1, 6.2%, or minus 6.1, 6.2%. And then what the black dots show is the last 20 results over time. What the white dots show is the running mean. So you can just see overall how's the average. So each one of these points is the average of the previous 10. The only problem is that, like I mentioned before, if you have plus, minus, plus, minus, plus, minus, it'll work out to be perfectly along the line. So we don't normally recommend using this white line for too much detailed analysis. It just gives you a bit of an idea.
هو بيحكي لكم كل النتائج اللي انتم هتطلعوها رح يحط لكم اياها عشان تشوفوا انتم قديش البرسنتج ديفيشن عندكم. كل سامبل رح يحط لكم اياها عشان انه هنا ايش كان السامبل نمبر اللي بالاسود هي عباره عن الديفيشن تبع اللي هو السامبل تبعكم، لكن الابيض هو الرننج مين اللي احنا حكينا عليه بعد 10 شهور بيجيكم بيبدا يعدل. So the running mean, it will not, like they will see it after 10 samples.
Yeah, so that you won't see that white line until after 10 results have been returned.
يعني المين ورننج مين هيك اللي فهمت انا صح؟
running mean بعد 10 شهور عينات
عيناتك وبعد 10 شهور حتشوف الرننج مين تبعتك كيف ماشيه.
زي اللي بيجي
فرقت يعني تقولوا بعد 10 شهور وبنعمل ليرنينج مين في عندي على الشارت نفسه نقطه وقبلها نقطه، نقطه وقبلها نقطه.
هذه النقطه وقبلها نقطه، هذه الابيض راح تشوفيه بعد 10 شهور عشان يدخل لك اياه جوا الشارتنج. انت راح يجيك الاسود بعد 10 شهور راح يبدا يحط لك الابيض.
فيها لا فيها شيء.
هو شيء حكاكم كلمه مهمه قال
حاجه 10 ايام
تعمل البيز لاين تبع
لازم تكوني مريتي ب 10 دورات عشان يطلع لك.
بس هو قال لك ما تاخديش كثير فيه، تركزي عليه بالاسود.
في النهايه التارجت سكور تبعهم هذا بيجي وايه بناء عليه انت بدك ايش تحسبي ايش تشتغل، هل انت اكسلنت ولا بتحطي تحسين ولا اصلا مش مقبول نتائجك. هي النقطه.
خلاص يس
ان شاء الله. حتى
So yes, there's an example of a lab.
هذا مختبر ثاني برضو شايفين انتم فيه نقطه وين جايه؟ يس
عادي نحن نطلع يعني.
This is an example of a lab where they're getting a persistently negative bias. So generally their results are always less than the mean. So this is indicative of a lab potentially has a systematic error, which they haven't been correcting over time. So again, you can just use these charts to see how is my performance over time. Am I seeing any shifts or trends or anything that I need to look at?
هذه هو عندنا عشانه تحت المين كل اللي طلعوا فبقول لك انه في عندك سيستميك ايرور. بس الفكره وين؟ الفكره انه هذا الشيء حطوا لكم اياه عشان تشوفوا انتم ادائكم على مر العينات كلها. تقدر انت تشوف اذا في عندك ترند معين، في عندك تقدم قاعد بتتظبط النتائج عندي ولا لا.
انا عندك عندك سؤال القضيه.
Systemic error in here it is with the sample itself or the equipment.
Well, it's not going to be the sample, probably because again the sample, this is material that's used in thousands of labs around the world. Probably what is happening in this lab is maybe they're registered wrong. Maybe they picked the wrong method whenever they registered and they've never corrected it. It could be, a problem with the instrument itself. We can talk. We have an entirely separate presentation about, corrective actions. But there's a whole range of things that they can look through. But certainly, looks like it's a systematic problem, whether it be a registration problem or something with the instrument. But something is going wrong here because based on this, you would expect that the patient results would always be 5 to 10% lower than what they should be. Theoretically, so that means that they might be diagnosing people wrong because they're always 5 to 10% lower.
خليني اوضح لك اياها
بس
رنا.
انت لو عملت روت كوز اناليسيس عشان تعرف ايش المشكله اللي من وراها كان في عندك هذا
تتسجل بعد 10 شهور. تمام. هو لما يكون في عنده سيستميك ايرور من مين جاي؟ اذا هذا رننج
هو ضله في نفس هو ضله ماشي على نفس الشيء ما عملش كوركتيف اكشن، هو كان ياخذ نتائجه وشركه
مش هذا رننج مين؟
كان نتائجه
انترناشونال.
نحيل مين هنا
الصح هنا اللي يكون حوالين هذا
خط المين.
بس انت هدول نتائجك انت
الاختبارات المشاركه هو الخط.
لا نتائجك انت
انت على مر 18 شهر.
الابيض نتائجك انت بس مجموعه هو المين لكل اللي انت قدمتيه
متراكم على بعض. يعني مثلا الشهر الاول والشهر الثاني مثلا حسبنا المين اللي هنا واعطوني نقطه مثلا. هذا المين رننج مين
يبدا يكتبهم بعد 10 شهور.
بعد 10 شهور. طب وين اجت النقاط البيضاء؟ ليش ما يكون
بعد 10 شهور تجيك النقاط البيضاء
وبعدين نقاط ابيض مثلا زي هيك.
You always have the black dots, so you'll be able to start to see on your own if you're having a systematic error, because you'll see that they're all below.
خليني اوضح فمو النقطه هذه مهمه جدا. دقيقه واحده بالمش، يعني هو برنامج الايكاس برنامج تحسين الاداء. هم بيبعثوا لك عينات، الهدف منها ديتكشن للايرور سواء سيستماتيك ايرور او راندوم ايرور. اذا والله دائما بقول لك احتفظي بالعينه زي ما قال لحين صدور النتيجه. والله اذا انت طلعت العينه بعد ما كان عندك ايرور واشتغلت عليها كم مره صارت النتائج فعلا مطابقه وكويسه، يبقى انت حسنت الاداء، يمكن طلعت السيستماتيك ايرور.
ماشي انا مش مختلف معك هذا الكلام.
فهو بيرسم فهمت النقطة هذه؟
أنا كل
يعني
أنا قصدي
بس
هو بيحكي عن نقطة يا أبو أحمد إنه رننج بين بعد 10 شهور. أنت فاهمني؟ بعد ما أنا أحط كل نقطة كل شهر أنا بحط نقطة كل شهر بحط نقطة. وبحكي رننج مين بعد 10 شهور عامل لي نقاط بيضاء من أول شهر ل 18 شهر.
تطلع بعد ال10
يعني كل نقطة بيضاء النقطة
Michael, so up and before the 10 months, they will still have the black dots on this chart, or this chart, all of it will only occur on.
No, the black dots will still be there. It'll just be, they'll only have like one, then they'll have two, then they'll have three, then they'll have four. So yeah, it'll just be, only the black dots will be there at the start. But to be honest, I don't regard the running mean percentage deviation has very limited usefulness because it can cancel out so easily. Like a situation like this is useful because you can see we're always got a negative bias, but on the rest of them, it's not as useful. That's why the target score, if I'm looking at a lab's performance, the number one thing I look at first is target score because it's completely independent. It's always positive and it's the best assessment that you can use on RIQAS.
هو بس بده فيها كميزه اضافيه انه بعد 10 شهور بيجيب لك قديش انه كان معدل المينز تبعته اللي انت تشتغله.
So Michael, I definitely think we're going to need your support when they've actually run their first batch of their first panels, and when they've got the results back. I think it'll definitely be very good to be able to have some examples from our own results. I think that will make a lot more sense once everybody really understands what materials we're getting, how they're preparing it, how it's running, and then how to get the results and what the results mean. I think that will definitely be less abstract.
Yes, and I think we always see whenever, especially labs who haven't been running any QA before, quite often they'll get performance flags at the start because either got the wrong registration or there's a problem in the machine that they haven't seen before. So I think that definitely you'd expect that there would be some flags at the start.
أولها بيكون دائما في عندكم علامات على أساس إنه لسه أولها بعدين تستوعبوا. بيكون في غلط في الريجستريشن، بيكون غلط في الإدخال، بيكون في لأنه أول مرة لسه إحنا نتعلم.
سؤال يعني تسألي لما ما يخلص اللقاء، إيش الفرق بين الريكاس والكاب والإيكاس؟ هذه اللي حكوا عنها الثلاثة.
مؤسسات مختلفة، هذه براندوك بتقدم الإيكاس، الكاب بتقدمها مؤسسة ثانية.
يعني
كل واحد يس. Okay.
And I think as well, the other thing about RIQAS is very useful for you deciding what type of machines or what brand of machines and kits you want to use, because you might find after a few months of using RIQAS that you identify one particular brand that doesn't perform well at all. And then you can actually look at RIQAS and say, okay, well, who is performing well? And you can then choose your procurement based on that. In some countries, we've got it where they actually use RIQAS quite heavily when they're deciding tenders because they see who's performing well, who's not.
I'm going to give you a heads up. A lot of these labs have got 3, 4, 5 different chemistry machines, which we're going to be registering. So there will probably be quite a lot of difference between the performance of the various different machines. So I think, again, after like a few months, we should definitely have a review session with you guys, and maybe you can help point out which machines are more or less reliable, because this obviously is impacting the patient care on a day-to-day basis when they run the different machines at different times. So I think we should set a big plan for going over results in a lot more depth in like after the first set of results, and then maybe after like 3-6 months as well, just to make sure we're starting to see those not the running averages, but making sure we can start to compare over time and really understand over time what we're looking at. So we should definitely schedule those in, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think whenever we're dealing with groups of labs, like, we deal with all of the Ministry of Health in Saudi, for example, all run RIQAS. And the first 2 things we look at is, did the lab return the results? If not, then that's up to the local organisers to figure out why they didn't return results. Is the machine down? They don't have a reagent, don't have a calibrator, whatever. And the second thing is, did they have any performance flags? If they're passing those 2 things, that's a good start. And from there, you can still do lots of analysis, but that's the 2 biggest things. Make sure returning results, and then do they have any flags?
The first 2 things that we're looking at is, does everybody return all the results? I guess we will be looking at the registration, if everybody's registration, and is there any major red flags? That's the first 3 things we'll focus on.
اول حاجتين رح نركز عليهم في اول مره انه احنا سجلنا كله صح وان احنا اخذنا نتائج.
Okay, so move on. So the 4th chart is a very useful chart, and I think it's one of the best ones to look at. This is the percentage deviation by concentration chart. So this one is different, that it's not in chronological order. It's not in the order of time. It's in the order of the concentration of the sample which has been provided. So you can see here that the x-axis is showing different concentration levels, and then you've got the percentage deviation the same way as the previous chart. On this one, the most recent sample is indicated by the black square, and the previous 20 results are basically shown by the dots. So again, this will start off the first sample. You'll just see 1 black square, and then after that, the circle.
معينتكم في البرسنتج ديفيشن بناء على الكونسنتريشن، فبديكم انه مثلا السوداء هي الحاليه لكن الرمادي هي العينات السابقه.
So this is very useful to see if you have any concentration related biases. So you can see here.
Just 1 second, like there is a question.
Okay.
نفس الفحص حسب فحص السكر يشتغل على جهاز ايربا، جهاز مندري، جهاز كذا، ما في نفس المجتمع. الان النتيجه اللي حتجيني لفحص السكر 3 قيم ولا حتجيني متوسط كل جهاز حتجي له لحد؟
So he's asking because like one sample can be done in, for an example, 5 devices as we said before, and we will be running, for an example, 3 chemistry equipment with the sample. So like the glucose will be run on like Erba, Mendry, and type, for an example. So that the comparison will be like the glucose on the 3 equipment, or it will be like 1 report per equipment.
Yeah, you basically would get, you should register each machine separately, and then so basically the sample you run in Erba, you'll report on the Erba registration. So for example, the lab registration number will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Erba will be A, Mendry will be B, Human will be C. So the Erba sample you report in the A registration, the Mendry you report in the B, and the other one you report in the C. So then the peer group, they're not comparing to each other really. What the Erba is getting compared with the Erba peer group, the Mindray is getting compared to the Mindray peer group, because that's essentially, it doesn't, how they perform compared to each other doesn't really matter. It's how they perform compared to the international peer group.
لانه هو ايش بيحكي بيقول لك انه المقارنه راح تكون مش راح نقارن الجلوكوز على 3 اجهزه، مثلا المندري راح تكون مقارنه مع الناس اللي بتشتغل على مندري، الاربا مع الناس بتشتغل على اربا، وانتم بعدين لما تاخذوا الريبورت تقدروا تشوفوا انه الثلاثه كيف. Yes.
Is it maybe Mohammed, you can answer as well, but generally are the labs using like open system reagents, so it would be like an urban machine but then with reagents from Human or whoever else, or does it tend to be the same reagent? It's like the MOH in the West Bank, Mohammed?
Yes, the same unless they are using, for example, like sometimes maybe Roche or then they are using the reagents from. Excuse me?
You just broke up. Could you repeat your last sentence, please?
Michael is asking about the machines and the reagents used. For example, in West Bank here we have most machines in Ministry of Health are Abbott for chemistry and immunoassay. So they are using the same reagent and the same machine, because it is a reagent rental here in West Bank for other, mainly in the big hospitals, but for other labs like the public health centers, they are using reagents from different manufacturers. It does not has to be from the same manufacturer of the machine. For example, you can have chemistry from Airba and reagent from Human, from Chemilex, from different suppliers.
Yes, that's what we have here, and we have maybe 2 or 3, 4 different chemistry machines per lab using different reagents.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that will definitely be one of the parts of the interpretation that we'll be looking at as well, because, you know, obviously elsewhere in the world, it tends to be like that model that Mohammed mentioned, where they use Roche reagent, Roche machine, Roche. So obviously with these additional variables in there, you know, the peer group sizes will be different. So yeah, again, this is something that we can assess over time to see. And yeah, so we'll see, I guess, what the peer groups are, how they are. So yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, going back to the charts here. So again, it's very useful for looking at, do we have any problems with particular concentrations of samples? So you can see
السامبل نفسه قديش بالاسود هي الحاليه، الرمادي اللي قبل
من غير تحديد للسماع يعني خلاص اللي فات وخلصنا.
بريفيوس 20
previous 20 result at the same comparison level. إنه كلهم كانوا تقريبا على نفس المرحلة. What do you mean by concentration related biases?
This is like low, medium, high. So if it's biased, if your equipment does not work very well on a very low range, then you will see that you have more problems when your concentration is at the lower range, or maybe the opposite. So it will let you know whether your equipment or your reagents and your testing is suitable for the full clinical range that we need to test for.
جهازك يجيب العالي ولا
انه قديش انه الكونسنتريشن اللي انت شغال عليه ممكن يكون كثير واضح، تعرف انه في عندك مشكله، بناء عليها ببين انه في عندك ايرور.
I think this is a good example of a lab where they've got a problem. So if they're getting a sample which is between 100 and 140, the performance is very good. The percentage deviation is very low. Anytime they get a lower sample, the deviations are much wider. So that suggests that if they get a patient sample within 20 to 60, maybe they'll get the result right, maybe they won't. So you would suggest that this particular method or this particular lab is not reliable in these low-level samples. That may or may not be clinically relevant, but certainly it indicates that there's an issue there that they need to look at.
وش بحكي لكم مثلا لو وجدتوا العينه اللي انتم المفروض انه تكون تركيزها ما بين 120 و40، هتشوفوا انه كيف النتائج كلها حوالين بعض لكن لما بيكون التركيز اقل ممكن الجهاز يقدر يعمل ديتكشن ويطلع لك نتيجه ممكن تكون صح، بس انت بتشوف قديش انه هم مفرقين بناء على انه الكونسنتريشن كثير واطي.
يعني تشبه حالة البوليو مثلا، انه مثلا في حاسة البوليو انه مثلا كمية معينة بقدرش الجهاز مثلا يقرأها او مثلا يسحب.
لا لا
يعني تسمحوا لي بس. اوكي، هون المقصود في هذا الشارت انه للعينات اللي الكونسنتريشن تبعها عالي او كويس النتائج تطلع دائما بريسايز اراوند ذا مين، لكن العينات اللي بتيجي واطيه على فرض مثلا الجي او تي او الجي بي تي على بعض الاجهزه لما تكون الليفل واطي ممكن يعطيك نتيجه مختلفه كل مره، او ممكن تكون صحيحه ممكن تكون خطا. فالكوفيشنت اوف فاريشن للنتائج لللو ليفل كونسنتريشن مختلف، يعني عالي الكوفيشنت اوف فاريشن، فالنتيجه حتكون دائما مختلفه. وبالتالي احنا راح نتفق كالتالي انه هاي الكت او هذا الفحص من هذا الريجنت مثلا او على هذا الجهاز اللو ليفل عليه مش دقيق. اوكي، فانا لللو ليفل سامبلز راح ادور على ريجنت ثاني او على كيت ثانيه اللي يقدر يعمل لي ديتكشن صح لللو ليفل.
في الباسز يكون كاتب حاجه اسمها ديتكشن ليميت اللي هو اقل قيمه بيقدر يعملها ديتكشن.
ايوه
تمام، انا بناء عليه حاضر والله قدر يحدد لي ولا لا.
في البامفلت بيكون مبين انه قديش الديتكشن ليميت تبع
مثلا او في الهاي رينج، او في الهاي رينج ممكن انه بيعطيني قراءات مختلفه. فهون ببين في هذا الشارت انه البرفورمانس تبع هاي الكيت كويس على كل الابزورب، على كل الكونسنتريشن رينج ضمن اللينير ليفل تبع اللينير ليفل تبعنا تبع الكيت، ولا على الواطي مختلف عن العالي. فهمت عليكي؟
في موضوع ثاني اللينياريتي بيجي بيقول لك انت صعب تاخذ دايركت ديتكشن، المفروض تعمل ديليوشن بروتوكول النورمال سلاين. انا بجي لي 5 عينات مش عارف كيف بدي اقدر احدد انه انا والله محتاجه، او مجرد ما يطلع لي قيمه عاليه اروح اعمل لحالي ديليوشن وارجع مره ثانيه ريرن اعمل.
انا القصد هنا، القصد في هذا الشارت هون ببين لي البرفورمانس تبع هذا الكيت انه وين هو منيحه. مثلا زي هذا الكيت اللي في هذا الشارت للكونسنتريشنز اللي فوق ال100 اتس اوكي، دائما نتائجها متقاربه للعينات اللي بتيجي وبيطلع الكونسنتريشن تبعها زي هيك. بينما لللو ليفل بتكون النتائج دائما مختلفه، ممكن تكون النتيجه صحيحه ممكن تكون خطا.
عمر مساك بالخير.
ايوه مسيك منور النبي. هلا ايمن.
الله يسعدك. انت القصد هذا انه هاي النقاط كلها لنفس السامبل، انه انا بدي اعمل فيريفيكيشن للكيت، يعني انا مش هعتمد الكلام الموجود في الكيت في المير تبعته او في الشغل مكتوب. انا هعيد العينه 4-5 مرات واشوف قراءاتها هل هي متقاربه او لا في اللو ليميت وفي الهاي ليميت، واقدر احكم عليها ولا هاي الشغل بالنسبه
الريكا سامبلز راح توصلك انت يو دونت نو ذا ريزلت.
صحيح
تمام. هلا ممكن تكون عاليه، نتيجه عاليه في الكونسنتريشن الهاي، ممكن تكون واطيه. بعد فتره راح تلاحظ انه انت ما دامك مستخدم نفس الجهاز ونفس الكيت يعني نفس الميثود، النتائج تبعت ريكاس عندك للعينات اللي الكونسنتريشن تبعها بين 100 ل 140 يو ار دوينج ويل. تمام. بينما للعينات اللي الكونسنتريشن تبعها واطي كل مره عندك نتيجه شكل. اوكي، فهون انت راح تعرف انه الكيت تبعتك it does not detect the low level منيح.
انا بدي اغير نوع الماده ممكن عشان انا اجيب الاكسبتبل.
كانه هنا احنا
صحيح.
تبع كانه هيك نقيم
الريت عشان اقدر اشوف اللي بيوافق مع جهازي
100%.
كلها كانت هذا الفلوت ثم بتكون نتائج ادق او افضل طبعا
100%. فممكن
صار مع اليوريا ترميز مره في الكنترول مثلا ايش كان الترميز ايش كان الكنترول اللي فيه مشكله عندك؟ كنت اللي سالت فيه المره اللي فاتت لما كان في لا ال تي كان ايش اللي كان فيه مشكله؟
مش ماشيين مع بعض، يعني مثلا النورمال والباثوجينيك كنترول باثولوجيكال، واحد عالي اب مين والثاني داون مين، مش الاثنين مثلا اب مين والاثنين تحت داون مين.
يعطيك مثلا مش الان شيء من غير تغيير الان
احنا فعلا غيرنا الكنترول
هي نفس المشكله. كان مثلا في رينج معين ما في مشكله بالضبط.
بس هذه في حديث مع فيليبي جينينج. طيب ماشي. يس مايكل. ايوه
يا جماعه بس دقيقه اخر كلمه. هدول النقاط، هدول عينات ريكاس، انت راح تشوفهم يعني كل مره راح يزيدوا عندك. فالعينات الريكاس مش كلهم ذا سيم فاليو ايتش تايم، راح تكون مره يودوا لك النتيجه عاليه مره واطيه، راح يبين عندك انت مع الوقت. هلا البرفورمانس تبعك انت للعينات اللي بيكون الكونسنتريشن تبعها مثلا بين 120 ل 140، انت البرفورمانس تبعك ات از جود، تمام. بينما لاحظ في اللو ليفل راح تكون نتائجك كثير مختلفه. هذا بيعطيك انديكيشن انه الكت اللي عندك مش مليحه لعينات المرضى اللي فيهم لو ليفل. اوكي يعني مش دقيقه الكت عندك لللو ليفل.
استوعب عليك.
اوكي
ايجنت كمان والله ممكن في نهايه الكومبليكيشن للجهاز نفسه.
اوكي
فهمت عليك؟
مثلا هاي كيف يا رنين؟
يس.
في هاي الحاله انت بتصير تقول طب انا ما دام عندي ممكن يجينا انا عينات مرضى ومرات كثير يكون في عندي لو ليفل، معناته هذه الكت مش راح اعتمد عليها، خلينا ادور على كت ثانيه تعطيني بريسيجن احسن على اللو ليفل.
هيك انت بتصير تقيم الرئه نفسه وانت بتستخدمه.
بالضبط تمام.
فهمنا عليك.
اوكي
يس مايكل.
go ahead Michael.
Well, yeah, if I seen a chart like this, one of the first things I would be asking is what levels are their QC? Because theoretically, if they had a similar level 1 at around 20 to 40, you would think that they would also see quite wide variation in CVs and their QC. So again, you could confirm then that this is a problem with the method. Maybe we don't want to use this particular brand anymore for this.
Yes.
And I think also we would see if they're running, and we'd see this again with first party QC, Roche QC, Roche instrument. They'll say, well, my QC says I'm fine. We ask, okay, what's your QC? Oh, level 2 is 140, level 1 is 100, and it says I'm fine. You would expect to be fine in this area. The question is, how's the performance at the low level? So it's always about, whenever you're looking at this, you would look at what's my QC results, and is my QC at clinically relevant concentrations in relation to my EQA. This is why we decide our concentrations based on a biochemistry advisory board, because the idea is we want to try and make them as clinically relevant as possible.
هو نفس اللي انت حكيته يا محمد.
صحيح. ومن هون احنا عندنا مرات ممكن يكون بعض الكتات يعني كمان راح يكون الانترنال كنترول برضه في مشكله على اللو ليفل.
الانترنال كنترول كمان بيكون في مشكله على اللو ليفل. فانت بتستعكس. اوكي. تمام يا جماعه.
تمام.
صباح الخير. يس مايكل.
Go ahead, Michael.
So if your assay is performing well, it probably is going to look something like this, because you can see the deviation is low, whether you have a low sample, a medium sample, or a high sample. So you'd say, okay, we don't have any confirmation biases here. So that's a good chart, you would say. But yeah, whenever you're looking at this, it's always worth checking your kit insert of your reagent, see what's the analytical measuring range and the performance claims of the assay, and how does it correspond with what you're seeing on RIQAS? Does your kit insert say the assay will perform badly at below a certain level? What's the LOD and the LOQ of the assay? How does that correlate with the concentration of RIQAS? And how does it correlate with your QC concentrations? And ultimately, you may decide that we may not necessarily report results below a certain level or above a certain level based on the results. Because of unacceptable performance.
هو نفس اللي حكاه، بناء على الكيت احنا بنشوف قديش اللور ليميت اوف ديتكشن، وبناء عليه ممكن نشوف انه في رينجات معينه هتبقى مش لعند ليميت معينه مش هتعمل ديتكشن وممكن ما نستخدمهاش. نفس اللي حكاه محمد تقريبا.
So yeah, you can see here, for example, here they can use the chart. So if you look at this chart, you can see basically the results are sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, and you might not be able to tell exactly from this chart what the problem is. But by then combining this with the percentage concentration, you can see that it's clearly a concentration-related issue. The lower samples have a wide variation. The medium is still quite wide variation, and the higher samples are a low variation. So you can use the charts in combination with each other when doing your interpretations.
لما بتستخدمهم مع بعض عشان تقدر تفهم انه كانت النقاط على اليمين هنا في المقارنه كثير بعيده، فانت هنا بتقدر انت تقرر مثلا هنا قديش كانت
عينات النورمال فين خطا، النورمال ممكن تكون
انه قديش هذول كثير قراب من بعض، هذول شويه قراب بس هذول كثير بعاد عن بعض.
هو بس رنين التيشيرت هذا بيجي يحطوا على اساس 5 سامبلز بعد صح؟
كل واحده
هذه كل واحده بتشارت خاص.
كل جهاز بتشارت خاص فيه.
يعني جلوكوز 5 عينات على 3 أجهزة.
ايوه
ويا ريت ريحنا قلنا جود.
لا لازم تعرف وين المشكله بالضبط. Yes, Michael.
Okay, so then the last part of the RIQAS report is the summary page. So this is the final page of the report. So basically, whenever a lab gets a report, this should be the first thing that they should look at.
هو هذا اول شيء بدور على المختبر، اول ما باخذ الريبورت بدور على السمري تحت يشوف وين في مشاكل، بعدين بتروح بالضبط على كل واحد فيهم. Yes.
So basically, how it works is if you have a failure on all 3 performance, so you can see that the 3 performance metrics that we talked about before, the standard deviation, the percentage deviation, and the target score. So if your standard deviation,
yes,
if your standard deviation is greater than plus or minus 2, that's a fail. If the percentage deviation is greater than the allowable limit for that assay, that's a fail. And if the target score is less than 50, that's a fail. If you fail all 3, that means you get a red triangle. So the red triangle indicates that you should do some investigation.
اللي هو المثلث الاحمر معناه انت بتدور على السبب، فانت كل واحده منهم اللي بيقيموك بناء عليها الاس دي اي والديفيشن لانه هذا شوفوا هذا اقل من 50 كان.
Okay, you keep talking.
I did have one question, sorry. Is it possible to fail on 1 or 2 of the parameters? Or if you fail on 1, you're more likely it's calculation to fail on all 3?
Yeah, but generally the vast majority of the time you do fail on all 3. It's possible. Here's actually a situation where the SD is within the limit. It's 1.82. The percentage deviation is outside and the target score is outside. They're marginally outside. You can see 46 instead of 50. So for here, you need to have all 3 to get the red triangle. So for here, you would still say, I have a problem here. I'm not going to ignore it. I'm going to look into it. But it just hasn't been quite enough to get the red triangle.
بس يعني إذا الثلاثة أنت سقطت بالثلاثة بتاخذ المثلث الأحمر علامة الشرف. لو 2 بعلم لك إياهم هذول فيهم غلط وبتشتغل عليهم. Yes.
I think that.
يعني الرسوم بجد 3.
Yes, Michael.
On these, you can see we have the running means. So again, these will only be generated after 10 results, but running mean, standard deviation, percentage deviation, target score. Basically, I ignore this one and this one because they can cancel each other out. They don't mean anything, but this one is very useful. So if we take, for example, this is a blood gas program, PO2, you can see that they performed badly on these 2 analytes. But whenever you look at the result of the previous 10, it's between 70 and 100, which is actually good performance. So that suggests that it's maybe not something that's truly systematic. Maybe something's went wrong with that one sample. However, if you look at glucose, for example, okay, glucose, the last one passed, but generally it's been really low. It's only just passing each time. So once you've done 10 months and have these the running mean target score, it's very useful for troubleshooting and identifying is this a random error, is this a systematic error?
I believe that sounds like have gone while you were speaking.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, yeah, I was just saying that it's important. I don't really use running mean standard deviation or running mean percentage deviation. The running mean target score is very useful, and it's useful for interpreting results. So for these examples, they've had a bad result on PCO2 and PO2 in this last sample, but if you look at the running mean target score, they're generally quite good. So that suggests that there's something specific to the last sample, something's went wrong in the lab, or it's a random error or something like that. But generally the performance is good on those two analytes. If we take glucose as another example, the last sample, they got an okay score, 74, but consistently over the last 10, they've been running a very low target score, so the performance has not been good on glucose. So you can use this to say, right, every time I'm going to keep a close eye on how my glucose is doing because it seems to be an analyte that we have a problem with.
بحكي لكم انه ممكن تستخدموا اللي هو الرننج مين كمثال للتارجت سكور عشان تعرف انت مثلا زي ما حكى مثلا الجلوكوز هنا تحت 74 بس انت تطلع على الرننج مين لسه يعتبر واطي فانت هيك احنا عرفنا انت في المرتين مثلا اللي قبل او ثلاثه قبل ما كنتش شغال منيح فبناء عليه السكور لسه ضايله واطيه لكن انت لما انت اشتغلت منيح السكور اللي فات واللي قبلها بتلاقي انه الرقم عندك اعلى من التوتال سكور نفسه. Yes.
Okay, sorry, I was just checking something there. So
فرضا انه ثالث رابع شهر صار عندي مشكله دروب لكن بناء على الرننج مين لا انكلودد يعني مش حاعتمد عليها كتقييم جهاز في هذا الشهر.
انتوا خدوا بالكم انه الرننج مين بيجيك بعد 10 شهور. Yes.
So this is the full shot of what the final summary page looks like. The other statistics that they've got here is overall running mean. So basically what this looks at is the average of the average. So this is overall running mean standard deviation, overall running mean target score, overall running mean percentage deviation. So again, I would say this number isn't very useful. This number isn't very useful because what these are looking at is the average of all the averages. However, this score is very useful. This is overall running mean target score. This is the average of all your analytes over the last 10 months, over the last 10 samples, and you can see the result is 90. So if you remember, 50 to 70 is acceptable, 70 to 100 is good, 100 to 120. So overall, you could say the overall performance of this lab is in a good category. So that's positive overall.
الأداء تبع المختبر قديش منيح. الحين هو حكى لكم إنه اللي تحت هذول هو عبارة عن معدل كل المعدلات معدل المعدلات زي معدل الرننج مين للستاندرد ديفيشن الرننج مين المعدل
معدل الفحوصات
لكل
مين البيانات كلها
بس بقول انه اهم حاجه فيهم اللي هو معدل الرننج مين للتي اس هنا لانه هذا بيبين قديش اداء المختبر للفحوصات قديش فحكى لكم فاكرين المربع لما قال لكم من 50 وفوق مقبول جيد جدا فهذه تعتبر زي جيد
كامل للمختبر انت شغال 90% خلاص كويس قوي
للاميليز
انا كيف شغلي كامل في المختبر
يس
كيف تارجتاتي
انا قرأت انالايت اللي فوق اميليز يس
بس الكيمياء قصدي
كم من واحد ممكن يشارك في برنامج الإيكاس قديش العدد اللي ممكن مشارك في الايكاس كرقم عشان يشتغل الاس دي اي، عشان يشتغل بطريقه الاس دي اي. يعني مثلا على سبيل المثال 10 مختبرات لازم تكون مشاركه، 20 مختبر لازم يكون مشارك عشان يشتغل بطريقه الاس دي اي.
So how many laboratories should be participated in order to collect the SDI?
Assessment.
Sorry?
SDI assessment? Like how, like what the minimum number of laboratories in order to collect the SDI?
Well, the SDI, again, it's not, that's just one of the three performance metrics. Ultimately, it's about the peer group size. So the minimum number for you to be compared with the peer group is 5. There is no minimum number for the SDI because there's thousands of participants already. The relevant number is what's your peer group size, and the peer group size should be at least 5.
Yes, Michael.
I think that, you know, I don't know, Mohammed, does the Al-Quds scheme run in Gaza as well, or is that's just West Bank?
It is only in West Bank.
Okay. Because, yeah, I mean, I know in West Bank they have a local EQA scheme, and one of the challenges is that it's only a West Bank scheme. So it means that comparing results to each other, it depends on the peer group size and depends on the variation of the methods. And I think that often it's an all method comparison. And this is part of the problem, is that they could tell you that you're failing when it's a statistical reason why you're failing and nothing to do with your lab. So that's why using a big international scheme is much more useful.
It's the same challenge here, Michael. There is a interlaboratory comparison, which Mr. Assad at the back of the table you would have seen runs, but yes, it's based on sets of laboratories. It's a very small number compared to this scheme, and I very much hope that yourself and Assad will have many future conversations on how to build and support the local programs as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's always the challenge is to you know, I've been to Iran a number of times as well, and the same thing out there. They have local schemes, and it's always the question of who you're being compared with, and is it a fair comparison, and is it statistically relevant? And that's always the problem with the smaller schemes, is to getting that balance right. Okay, so kind of just to finish off, it's just a few slides about establishing root cause analysis. So it's about asking if you have a problem, why that problem occurred, and then continuing to ask why did it happen, how can it be prevented from happening, and how did we know that we made a difference? And really that's a team approach. So these next slides are really just about establishing a root cause.
يكون لازم هو عبارة عن يكون في فريق بيشتغل عليها، مش بس الكواليتي اوفيسر او الكواليتي مانجرز، يكون المختبر، الكواليتي مانجر والتكنيشنز. Yes.
And then, like I showed before, it's recommended that you have some sort of checklist to be able to go through and document whenever you do have a performance flag, because that will make it much easier to track it over time. And if you're seeing the same problems again and again, to help do the corrective action in advance.
عشان هيك بقول كل تشيك ليست مهمة عشان تضلك بشكل مستمر ومتابع. يعني كل مرة لما بعمل هذه التشيك ليست هذه بكون عارف بالضبط وين المشكلة، وبناء عليها ببدأ أشتغل. وراح يبعث لنا إياها وأنتم ممكن تعدلوا عليها بناء على المختبر عندكم. Yes.
So the next one, we're basically just going to look at a flow chart. So the first thing that you would want to ask whenever you're looking at your RIQAS reports is, for each analyte really, is the result within acceptable performance limits? If the first answer is no, so say for example you have a red triangle, the first thing they ask is, has a transcription error occurred? Has the person typed the result in wrong into their RIQAS account, and that's the reason for the flag? If that's the case, they can get the result corrected. They just need to do the printout of the result from the analyzer to show that they ran it correctly, and RIQAS will correct that for them.
الحين هو مش بيعملوا أول حاجة، هل الريزلت ما بين اللي هو المعدل المقبول ولا لا، اللي هو الليمت. اذا كانت يس هذه يس، اذا كانت لا اول سؤال بيسالوه انه هل في مشكله في تدخيل العينه. عشان هيك بقول لك لو جبت لي ورقه مطبوعه من العينه في ذاك الوقت احنا ممكن نعدل لك الادخال. Yes.
So if they've confirmed that they've typed the result in correctly, the next thing to check is have they registered correctly? And again, this is a very important part to start to make sure you pick the right assay, the right method, etc. And if not, then advise RIQAS of the correct details, either by changing it yourself or contacting Mohammed or RIQAS to get them to change it. Because again, if you don't update your registration details, you'll keep on having the same problems.
بيحكي لكم انه اول حاجه لو شفنا انه ما فيش مشكله في التدخين بنروح لهل دخلتوا انتوا الاساي الصح ولا لا. اذا دخلتوا الاساي، اذا ما دخلتوش الاشي الصح ساعتها راح نرجع لريكاس عشان يحطوا لكم الاساي الصح. Yes.
A high percentage, I think maybe above 50% of performance flags on RIQAS are due to either transcription errors or assay details. So that's always the two most obvious areas to check first.
انه هذا اول شيء احنا بندور بنفحص انه هل دخلنا الاساي الصح ولا لا. Yes.
So then the next thing, so you've confirmed that there's no transcription errors, you've confirmed that the assay details are correct. The next thing, have a look at the summary page. Is everything flagged or it's only one or two flagged? If everything is flagged, then they might have done something wrong in terms of ran the wrong sample or reconstituted incorrectly. So no situations you would expect there to be triangles for everything.
ويعني مستحيل بيقول لك كلهم يجوا فيهم مثلثات. فانت تاكدنا انه انت ما دخلت صح، الاساي كانت صح، بعديها رح نيجي لمين؟ للريفيو، ورقه الريفيو. هل كلهم طلعوا فيهم مثلثات حمراء؟ يبقى في مشكله، يا اما اذا دخلت العينه الغلط يا اما في سبب.
المشكله في السامبل.
Yes.
And if you're trying to
اثنين بدل واحد. لا انا مش ندخل عينه اثنين بدل واحد.
ايوه هي هيك.
ده بيحلل كنت حل
او الريكونستيتيوشن برضه. Yes. Yes.
So if you're trying to determine, if you do have a red flag and everything, and you're trying to figure out, was that the wrong sample or was it a reconstitution problem? First thing you can do is go to the fridge, check and see, you know, if you were supposed to run sample 7 for July, is sample 7 still in the fridge? Then you can say, okay, well, we must have run the wrong sample. So that's a good place to start.
وبحكي لك انه احنا اول حاجه بنبدا لما فكرنا انه هو هل ممكن تكون العينه نفسها غلط. اذا احنا حاطين العينتين شهر مثلا على شهر 7 شهر 8 في نفس الثلاجه بنرجع نتاكد هل احنا اخذنا العينه صح ولا لا. Yes.
If you don't think you've ran the wrong sample, the next thing to check is, was there a reconstitution problem? If it's a reconstitution problem, you would expect the percentage deviations to all be quite similar. If you ran the wrong sample, you'll probably see some are plus 1,000%, some are minus 500% because they're all different samples. If you've ran the right vial, but you've just reconstituted wrong, the percentage deviation will be quite similar. So you can see here that they're all around minus 60, minus 70. So this suggests to us that this is a reconstitution problem.
هل تعرف انه كان المشكله في الريكونستيتيوشن ولا لا؟ انه انت في نسبه الديفيشن، اذا انت كانت المشكله في التحليل نفسه هتلاقي انه كلهم نفس القراب من بعض. اذا كانت المشكله انه مثلا العينه كانت غلط، حكى اعتقد اول وحده، يعني هتلاقي فيه سالب او موجب مع بعض، مش كلهم في نفس
يعني كلهم ماشيين في نفس الاتنين، كلهم سالب او كلهم
حتى كلهم ما بين ال 55 الى كلهم سالب، وكلهم مثلا فوق من 34 لعندك 74 كلهم نفس
بيعطونا عينه بعد فتره بقول لك انه في عندك ديفكت، ترجع خذ العينه اللي كانت عندك الجزء زي ما قال اشتغلوا قديش الوقت المناسب عشان يشتغل عليها كمان مره، وهل بياخذوا بعين الاعتبار تاثير التخزين للماده الثانيه من فوي الصوره. يعني اجت عينه he sent a sample lyophilized and I make my examination وانا بعد ما طلعت الريزلت تبعتي كان في عندي ديتكتات قال لي ارجع خذ العينه.
The rest of the sample. So after taking the result, I took the sample again to retest it. For an example. So the storage and like the
العينه هل بيأثر على النتائج؟
result?
وقديش المده المناسبه عشان
And like how much time it should be like stored until when?
Well, generally, with the lyophilized material, one of the good things about lyophilized material is that we test it for a long period of time for 2 weeks at 50 degrees centigrade, and the performance is generally essentially the same even at that period of time. So lyophilized samples are highly stable in terms of transportation. So then the key question is when did you run it? Generally, you should always check the kit insert for each program to see what the recommendations are, but generally it should be.
It should be what?
Generally you should run the sample after reconstitution. You shouldn't keep it and store it for a period of time, but generally that's available on the kit insert. It gives you the recommendation as to when you could run it, how long it's stable for, etc., because it's different for each program.
Yes. لأنه مختلف لكل برنامج.
Okay. Okay. So if you've confirmed that.
هو في عندك سماعة فهو فكرك إنك تحكي عشان هيك بسكت. Yes.
So if you confirm that the lab has typed the result in correctly, they're registered correctly, they've ran the right sample, they haven't done reconstitution, then you might start to look at more detailed analysis, such as review instrument parameters and calibration. Do you have the assay set up correctly on the machine? Have you recently moved to a new reagent batch? And maybe there's a significant variation between the batches. And then also review the IQC results from the time the EQA sample was tested. How does your IQC results perform at that period of time as well?
فكرته انه انت تاكدت انه انت دخلت الاساي الصح، دخلت العينات الصح، كل تدخير كان صحيح، وغير هيك انت العينه الصحيحه دخلتها، بعدين بدك تبدا ايش تفكر؟ ايش الحين بدنا نرجع نفكر في الجهاز، بدنا نفكر في الرياجنت اللي احنا دخلناه، طريقه التدخين، هنروح نقارن مع الانترنال كواليتي كنترول هذاك اليوم عشان انه احنا نعرف بالضبط وين السبب. هو بيحكي بشكل عام على السبب الجذري كيف نجيبه للمشكله. يس.
تعرفوا انتوا ايش تعملوا قبل ما يجوا موعدهم بيعطوا لنا بروفيشنال تيست كده.
Yes.
So and then whenever you're looking at your QC results, was the QC out of limits at that period of time? Look for any shifts or trends. But like I mentioned before, also look at, well, what's the concentration of the QC compared to EQA? Is there anything related to that also?
بدك تشوف هذاك الوقت اللي انت عملت فيه الEQA الكواليتي كنترول هل هو كان اوت اوف ليميت ولا لا؟ غير هيك بدك تشوف اذا كان في شيفت وترندز معينه، بعديها بدك تشتغل على الاجراءات الصحيحه. Yes.
But generally, again, it's on the point that whenever we look at internal controls, generally we find that the internal controls will pass a lot of the time, and a third-party control, where it's independent of the assay, the instrument, it's more likely to reflect what you see in your EQA. So that's why what type of control are you running is also an important consideration.
كمان بيلعب دور ايش نوع الكنترول اللي انتم بتشتغلوه، يعني هو نفس كنترول الجهاز ولا هو كنترول ثاني غير عن المصنع تبع الجهاز.
So even if
Yes, Michael.
even if you don't have any performance flags, you still, so there's no performance flag, so there's nothing critical that you need to assess, but you still want to review your performance as you go along and see is there any room for improvement, even without performance flags. And one of the things you might want to look at on your RIQAS charts would be, are you getting any results outside even one SD, or are they all within one SD? And just in general, look for trends, positive, negative bias, changing in performance, because you may start to see a shift in performance before it becomes a flag, and be able to proactively do corrective action in advance of that, rather than waiting until it's an actual flag.
هو بيحكي لكم لو كانت ضمن الرينج ضمن الاكسبتد ليميتس، الحين انت ايش بدك تعمل؟ برضه بنفس الوقت بتعمل ريفيو، بدك تعمل تفحصوا ثاني التشارت، الليفيجينينج تشارت، كلهم اللي وريناكم اياهم. ليش؟ لانه ممكن يكون في مثلا بيطلع شوي شوي، انت ممكن تعمل بريفنتيف اكشن عشان قبل ما يوصل انه يصير ريد فلاج.
يعني احنا لا سلمانيا في يس بيرفورمانس
بدك تشتغلي. الفكره ايه؟ الفكره في التحسين المستمر.
مش حنديك احمر طلع على كل الارقام، الحاجه اللي تلاقي عندك انها قربت عن الحاجه اللي مش اكسبتبل
عنديها قبل ما تصير.
يس، انت بدك تحددي التشينج في البرفورمانس اللي ببين عندك عشان تشتغلي عليه كبريفنتيف اكشن قبل ما اصلا يصير عندك. Yes, Michael.
And then, yeah, you would look and see, are all the results one side of the mean, for example, which suggests that there's a bias involved.
هل كل الريزلت على ناحية واحدة من المين؟ عشان ساعتها بيكون في بايس في الريزلت. Yes. لكن طيب صبر.
And then just the last couple of slides that I put in, we've shown already in terms of the RIQAS website, in terms of where to enter results and look at the assay details, how it looks in terms of the different registrations that a lab would have, and essentially how the website runs. But yeah, we can answer any questions as we go along and people have them. But generally, we find the RIQAS website is fairly straightforward and people don't have too many problems with it.
الفكرة إنه الموقع تبع ريكس مباشر، يعني أنت بتمشي على الداتا انتري، بتشوف أنت إيش في عندك إساي، بتشيك عليهم، بتدخل النتيجة، إنه سهل التعامل معه، مش بده شيء.
And then again, so in addition to Mohammed from LEMX offering technical support, we also have teams of scientists at RIQAS. So sometimes you can reach out to me as well. The scientific technical support email is mail@riqas.com. So probably the first thing to do is check with Mohammed, see if something Mohammed can help advise on. If not, then it can be directed to me or directed to RIQAS as well, to help interpret any problems you have. Again, part of what you get when you get RIQAS is the kits and the reports. The other part is the support itself, and that's what we're very keen to provide.
محمد موجود، إذا في أسئلة محمد نفسه ما عرفش يحلها، رح نرجع اللي هو هذا الإيميل اللي هو فيه تكنيكال سبورت، اللي هو الناس العلماء اللي بيشتغلوا فيه ممكن
جدا. النتيجة أو الفيدباك بتيجي على بمجرد إنه الإنسان يعمل داتا انتري، ولا بعد قد إيه ولا في فترة.
So when is the report are coming after the data entry? It will take 72 hours, I believe.
Yes, it's 72 hours after the sample deadline. So
بعد الديدلاين 72 ساعة. So we already asked Mohammed about can we have 3 emails to send the reports to, other than the actual laboratories.
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
You can register up to 5 email addresses per registration. So
we need to send them to Mohammed directly, and he can register them.
Yes.
Yes. What you can also do is you can sign up for.
نصل على كل المختبرات.
هو رح يوصل اصلا للمختبرات، فاحنا رح نحط مثلا ايميل ابو احمد، ايميل من وحده المختبرات، ايميل من الصليب الاحمر، على اساس انه الريبورت النهائي رح يوصل ل غير المختبرات.
What you can also do is you can sign up for inter-laboratory reports also. So if you want it to be
For each individual laboratory, it's up to 3, right? But for the reports, it's up to 5. Like the summary reports.
the reports is up to 5 email addresses you can get.
Up to 5, but like from each laboratory, or
Yeah.
like
No, up to 5 for each registration. So if you've got a chemistry registration, you can have 5 email addresses that gets entered. So
because in the form it was a 3, like the primary, secondary, and other one.
no, you can have up to 5. I think it used to be 3, but they normally allow up to 5 as well, so it's not a problem.
So we will talk with Muhammad about that, so we can add the lab unit and the senior quality management to each laboratory.
Yes, and what we should also register you as a group as well if you want to get group reports too, comparing within the group, because it can help you also.
We already mentioned that we want to benefit from like the groups. We already told Muhammad about them, so.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's the end of the presentation. I like we talked about. I think it'd be a good idea to have another call in a month or two's time, so we can have a talk about some of the results that you've seen so far. I think it's always more useful and easier whenever you have it in your hand and you've done it already.
نعمل كمان مرة training بناء على الريزلت عشان ساعتها ممكن يكون في. So after the first cycle or
well,
couple of cycles.
It depends what you want, what you think. I mean, what do you think, Mohammed? When do you think we should do the next one?
Maybe 2 or 3 cycles. Let us first address delivery, because I need to talk to you about it after the call.
Yeah.
Okay, then we can arrange a call maybe after they are running 2 or 3 samples. I think they will have more questions. Frequently we will support them with any answer, with any question comes back from them, but then we can make like an evaluation of after 3 months or after 3 samples.
I think definitely we will need. I think definitely we will need a follow-up call for the first set of results, even on how to find the results. And I think maybe we will need to reevaluate which chemistries, because maybe we will have some of them registered incorrectly. So definitely after the first one, we will need a call. And then after 3 or 4 results, to have a look at the trends and the patterns coming out, we would need a call.
It's okay.
And I mean, we definitely need a lot of right now in the registration for the chemistry. We have a lot of different methods. Yeah, we have a lot of different people here with different chemistry machines and different reagents.
Yes.
And we don't know how to register them, so we definitely need a lot of support, like to get them even registered, and that would be great.
Okay, no problem.
You're breaking up.
I cannot hear you.
Yes, of course. Hello?
Yes. So can you stay on after this call to help us with that whilst we have everybody here to discuss? Mohammed?
Yeah, you mean regarding the chemistry?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm in the office, but after the call, phone call with Michael, and I have to answer many missed calls I received during our call. I have to answer them, so give me like maybe half an hour maximum, and I'll come back to you.
Okay, I will take the information from them, and then we can discuss it, Muhammad.
Yes, no problem.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
What can I say to that?
I hope
Okay.
that you found this presentation useful, and you know, if you have any questions later, we can discuss it as well. No problem.
They are staying until 2:30 maximum. So
Yes. I will talk to you on 2:30. Yes. Rani.
So there's no way for you to talk whilst we have them here now, because all of our chemists will be leaving right now, basically. But we have, like, whilst we have them here, would be the better opportunity, because Renine and I won't be able to ask the right questions. The guys with the chemistry knowledge are the ones who are, you know, the more relevant
Okay.
people.
Yeah, no problem. You can just give me 5 or 10 minutes maximum. I have to talk to Michael for something, and I have to answer some missed calls that I missed during our call. Just 5 to 10 minutes. I have to come back to the people who were calling me. Okay.
Okay, because so at so shall we say 1:15? Pull us back in, and we will just quickly go over the chemistry questions, and then that should be all of our registrations complete, and we can move on to the next discussion, which is like later on how we receive them.
Okay, excellent.
Perfect, thank you. We will speak to you in 10 minutes. We will let you know now, so we don't extend that time any longer.
It was nice to see you, Michael.
Okay.
No problem. Thank you very much for joining, and yeah, we look forward to being in touch with you over the coming weeks and months.
Thank you. في حد عنده سؤال؟
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
في سؤال
هم طلعوا. راح يجي بعد 10 دقائق، فاحنا ممكن نسأله عبال ما نجمع الأسئلة.